I never imagined my life would spiral into darkness. I thought the worst was behind me after that brutal divorce. But then one night I met Rebecca, a woman whose chaos rivaled my own. Her secrets were suffocating, her lies endless. The moment I let her in, everything crumbled. My home, my sanity, even my heart. Nothing was spared. And as the pieces of my life shattered around me, I realized too late. I'd made a deadly mistake. Now I'm left wondering, can I escape the storm I unleashed? Or am I doomed to drown in it? Freedom. That was the only word that fit how I felt. I stood outside the big doors of the courthouse and looked up at the sky. It was a dull gray, but to me it felt like a sunny blue. I took a deep breath, feeling like I was finally letting go of the hard times that the court had ordered to be over. My life was mine again. I wouldn't have to deal with lawyers, judges, or anger anymore. For 4 long years, my ex had pulled me into a tough fight over our divorce. At first, we thought it would be fair to share everything equally because our incomes were about the same, but her lawyer found this idea unacceptable. My lawyer pushed me to fight hard for what I wanted. In the end, I got a quarter of the things, she got another quarter, and the lawyers took half for themselves. Looking back, it would have been smarter to agree at the start. There was a time when I never used the word hate. Now I felt deep dislike for Linda Barrow. I would have wanted to shout it out loud to make the legal troubles stop. In my head, I called her a mean name. I could only guess what she called me. Those 4 years really weighed heavily on my mind and heart. I felt lucky there were no kids involved. We almost had a baby once, but that didn't happen. At the time, I thought it was a bad luck, but now I see it as a good thing. Bringing a child into all of that would have caused huge therapy bills and lasting sadness. 9 years of marriage, 4 of them spent trying to end it, all for nothing. It was hard to recall how we once felt when we believed we could achieve anything together. I had changed to we, and now it was back to I. I decided to stay away from dating women for a while. I tried dating once during the time apart, but it ended badly. I thought she understood I was going through a divorce, but she believed I was still married in every way. She used the word hate to describe how she felt. I felt a strong blow, and it made me want to stay away from dating. Giving it up was easy for me. I was not good at it anyway. As I got close to my car, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Carl, a good friend and someone who had been there for me through tough times in the last 4 years. He disliked Bitch Barrow almost as much as I did. I knew in my mind that he didn't really like me very much, but he pretended to care, and that made me feel good inside. "Are you free?" Carl asked when I greeted him. "Totally and officially," I replied, feeling proud. I hadn't felt this joyful in a long time. It almost made those tough 4 years worth it. "You choose the place. A fun club, a busy spot, or a place to watch sports. I'll join you and forget everything else," Carl suggested. He sounded as cheerful as I did. At that moment, I wanted nothing more. I need to hang out with a friend and have some drinks. It will take me a while before I can look at a woman without feeling upset. I was joking a bit, but really wanted a night out with the guys. There was a hockey game on tonight. A few good beers and some exciting plays sounded perfect to me. I wanted to forget the last 4 years. Forget everything about Bitch Barrow. "That sounds great. Let's watch the Blues game," Carl said. "I'll leave work a bit early and meet you at McGinty's at 5. We'll have some fun, try a new drink, and leave the past behind." I enjoyed how he spoke when he wanted to relax. I had a few friends who were only around sometimes, but Carl was my steady support when things got tough. There was no problem that a night out with him couldn't help ease. 5 it is. I heard the line go quiet, just like I expected. Saying goodbye wasn't his style. I drove home and changed out of my suit into some jeans and a gray sweater. "My friend, Damon!" Carl shouted from across the bar. He was wearing jeans and a Blues hockey jersey. The numbers on the jersey were starting to fade because he had worn it so often. I could tell he left work early since he had one glass that was half full and another glass that was completely empty next to it. I smiled at him and waved my fist in the air. Carl was just what I needed for the evening. I got to the table just as a young waitress, who was kind of cute, brought 2 tall glasses of dark beer. I think the empty glass used to be mine. Carl took my wallet and said, "The night is on me," pulling a $20 bill from his big stack of cash. "Come on, Carl," I replied, trying to sound offended. "I don't plan to drink all night on your money." "Okay, we'll take turns," Carl said. "I'll buy the first round." He gave the waitress the money before I could say no. It was going to be a fun night. Carl was not someone you'd want around at a funeral or a sad event. He was too loud, and he always made sure everyone noticed him. When I wanted to have a good time, he was the first person I called. He was so big that no one dared to complain, and he was nice enough that everyone liked him. Most importantly, he was very lively. Hockey was perfect for him. The fans were always cheering loudly. After I had a few drinks, I joined in and became loud too. The tables nearby started to cheer with us. They all turned into Carl tables. I met Edith and Ralph Wilkerson, Frank and Bob, along with two strong-looking older women named Mary and Thelma. We formed a small gathering, and our lively leader, Carl, kept our spirits high as if we were on the ice. He loved when the referees made bad calls, except when they were against our team. I joined in his grumbling just like I thought I would, celebrating with high fives when we scored at the party. Carl only spilled one beer that night, which was amazing. He couldn't talk without waving his arms everywhere. Those tall beer glasses were in danger of being knocked over. I ended up with some beer on my leg. It was a bit soggy, but not enough to make me want to go home. We remained at the bar long after the game was over. "How does it feel to be single again?" Carl asked as the ESPN channel began showing a soccer match from far away. "It feels like a big weight has been taken off my shoulders," I replied, taking a big sip of my beer. I lost track of how many we had drunk. I didn't even know the name of the drink in my hand anymore. It tasted sweet compared to all the dark beers we had enjoyed earlier. It didn't matter. I would see it through to the end. "That's why I never got married," Carl said, clinking his glass with mine. I chose not to say anything about the obvious. He had been living with a woman named Deborah for over 6 years. They acted like a married couple, even if they weren't legally tied. She allowed him a night out each week, trusting he would only spend a little money at a club. I took another sip of my beer and thought about how someone like her could be so understanding. Linda was not a person who let things go easily. That was clear. I tried to shake her from my mind. I needed to forget her. "You really don't want to go to the East Side and have some fun?" Carl asked. I could see it in his eyes. He wanted to find a reason to go enjoy himself. "Maybe another time," I replied. Linda had taken away my interest in that kind of night. I felt bad for not joining him to celebrate my divorce. I just wasn't in the mood for it tonight. I just want to sit here and forget the last 4 years. I signaled to the waitress. My beer was almost gone. "What's next on the menu?" I asked her. "You've finished all 10, she replied, "unless you want to try the light beers." I glanced at Carl, and he raised his eyebrows. "We don't drink that," we said together. We both laughed. It was an old joke between us that no one else seemed to understand. I realized we had drunk too much. So we decided to do the only thing we could think of. "Let's just start from the beginning again," I suggested. Carl grinned and lifted his empty glass toward me. The waitress sighed and went to get us another round of brown dead eyes. I was in a carefree mood. "I don't want to feel angry at her anymore," I said to Carl, my words a bit jumbled as we worked through the list for the second time. My thoughts were moving slowly, but my feelings were very clear. "It's done," Carl said. "Just let her go. You shouldn't hate anyone." I think that was Carl's main idea about life. Don't hold hate for anyone. But I still don't like her. "No, she really put you through a lot," Carl said. "Just don't hate her. It's not her fault she acts that way." That made me laugh out loud, and soon Carl was laughing too. I tried to hold back the laughter when I realized that Linda probably had a friend telling her it wasn't her fault because I was being a jerk. This made me laugh quietly to myself. I knew I had drunk too much. It was Carl who made me feel good instead of gloomy. It was really sad. Linda and I had once loved each other. There was no real reason, just our own foolishness to turn to anger. We had this weird need to blame each other, and in time it became our own problem. No, I wouldn't hate Linda, the awful Barrow. I would just move on. It was finished, and hating her would only hurt me more than it would her. "Carl," I said with the truth that comes from drinking, "I care about you, buddy." We clinked our glasses, and somehow they didn't break. We hit them hard enough for that. I emptied my glass and asked for some water. Time to clean myself up a bit. I thought carefully about getting into my car. I had stopped drinking almost an hour ago and felt good and ready. I walked carefully in a straight line when no one was watching, and I didn't trip. I probably shouldn't have been driving, but I felt fine. I easily found the unlock button on my key fob without looking. If I had trouble unlocking the car, it usually meant I wasn't focused. I started the car and took out my phone to connect it to the music system. I scrolled through a lot of songs until I found Jewel. Sometimes you just need a nice voice to make you feel better. Her voice always made me want to hear more, like a great story you don't want to finish. She filled my car with warmth as I backed out of the parking space and joined the busy road. Carl had helped me once more. My heart felt lighter, and with the divorce now over, I felt hopeful about what was next. I turned onto Travis Street, heading west, and missed my next turn. I wanted to just drive and let the music wash over me. I settled into the cozy space of my car and sang along to You Were Meant for Me. It was funny how much I enjoyed it, even if it was a bit silly. I missed the green light at Garnet Road. It was taking a long time. I stopped and closed my eyes for a moment, really enjoying the song. When it ended, the playlist picked a different song, Magic Carpet Ride. That wasn't what I wanted to hear right now. I wished I had a special phone that could tell me that Steppenwolf was not the right fit for my mood. I glanced at my phone to change the list of options. Suddenly I was pushed forward with force. I felt the sharp pull of the seatbelt digging into my chest. My forehead hit the steering wheel before I understood what had just happened. My car was halfway in the intersection, and a dark SUV with its left headlight and front grille smashed was parked right behind me. My head throbbed, and the loud music was still playing. Great. I turned off the engine and switched on the hazard lights. I stepped out of the car, feeling dizzy and confused. "The light was green," said a woman nearby. It took me a moment to focus. I thought, she hit me. "Your taillights were out," she continued. But I knew they were working fine. I walked to the back of my car and saw that both lights were broken. The big SUV had crashed into my bumper and crumpled the trunk. The cars were stuck together, and the left wheel of the SUV was barely above the road. "My lights were fine," I said, trying to stay calm. Both taillights were broken and unrecognizable. Only the left rear blinker still worked. "They were broken and the light was green," the woman argued. I looked up at her furrowed brows. Her nose was flared and her mouth was turned down. I had seen that look before. She must have taken lessons on how to be tough. She put her hands on her hips, challenging me to argue again. "Listen, it was an accident," I said. "You don't have to blame me for everything. That's why we have insurance." I tried to stay calm. "After 4 years in Bitch City, you learn to avoid fights you don't need?" I noticed her nose wrinkling, and then she smiled like she had won something. "You smell like a brewery," she said, as if it was some big win for her. It was just the drink that Carl spilled. I stepped back a little. I couldn't believe it was that strong. It happened more than an hour ago. "A little beer got on my pants," I said, pointing at my leg. "We should call the police and see what happens," she said, pulling her phone out of her pocket. She hesitated on the last number and looked at me. "The light was green, and your backlights weren't working." I let out a sigh. "Okay," I replied, not sure I could pass a breath test. But that's why we have insurance anyway. She ended the call. "Boxers or briefs?" she asked me. I stared at her, confused by her strange question. Did I just attract women who like to mess with guys? What? "Do you wear boxers or briefs?" she said again, saying each word slowly like I didn't understand English. Her short blonde hair bounced with her words, like she needed to make her point stronger. "Are you crazy?" I replied. Her car was pushing against mine. The repairs would cost a lot. She had tricked me into taking the blame, and now she wanted to look at my underwear. I had been drinking, so why did she sound so out of it? "Do what you want," she said while rolling her eyes. I really hated when Linda rolled her eyes at me. It felt even worse coming from this stranger, and I barely knew her. She started to walk back to her big SUV. "Why do you even care about my underwear?" I shouted, waving my hand in frustration. She looked at me while she held onto the car door. "The police are on their way whether I call them or not," she said in a bored voice, as if she thought I was foolish. If they're just wearing regular clothes, you can put your jeans in my car. We can say this was just a small accident. She opened the door, reached inside, and took out a small black purse. I could hear sirens approaching. She seemed like she had done this before. Are you trying to trick me? I asked. It felt like it could be some kind of plan. She rolled her eyes as she took out her license from her purse. Listen, she said, letting her arms hang down. If this is my fault, I could lose my license for 6 months or even more. My insurance might drop me too, but if it's your fault, I can keep driving. She shrugged her shoulders. Accidents weren't something she hadn't been through before. The sound of sirens was getting louder. They're going to notice what I noticed, she said, shaking her head as if she were trying to help a young child understand something. I took everything out of my pockets and put it on the hood of my car. Then I took off my jeans. I felt a bit embarrassed because I was wearing Ghostbusters boxers. Linda had given them to me as a joke a while back. I wasn't sure why I still had them, but I really liked the movie. I never meant to change clothes in the street. Looking good, the woman said with a smile. I would have liked it better if she had just rolled her eyes. I handed her my jeans, and she quickly tossed them over the seat into the back of her SUV. You were about to go out for some late-night tacos, she said confidently, like this was something she often did. You just put on a sweater and went to the drive-thru. I nodded in agreement. Damon Richardson, I said to her. I'm a fan of Ghostbusters. At least I made her laugh a little. It was a bit better than just rolling my eyes. My name is Rebecca Morrison, she replied. And honestly, the movie wasn't great. It seemed like she didn't know much about good films. I noticed some flashing lights, so I quickly picked up my wallet and keys from the car hood and tossed my phone into the front seat. Do you often pressure people like this, Rebecca? I asked, trying to keep my voice light and funny. It was easy to do since I was standing on a dark street wearing silly Ghostbusters underwear. Thank goodness they didn't shine at night. Sorry, Rebecca said. I really need help. You don't seem like someone with a bad past. Bad past? I hoped she meant mistakes. She was surprisingly calm about it all. She took a mint from her bag and gave it to me. I put it in my mouth. It felt like she was ready for anything. I was curious why I didn't dislike her. I really should have been more careful. She was ruining my night. A police car drove up behind us, its lights flashing and lighting up my clothes. Our cars were in the way, blocking the lane and sticking out into the intersection. Someone must have called because we were a clear danger. Is anyone hurt? The officer shouted from behind his door, one foot still in the car. We both shook our heads and said no. I'll be with you in a minute, he said as he got into his car and closed the door. You'll need your registration, Rebecca called out, leaning into her SUV. Her jeans were very snug, and she looked good in them. I noticed for a second, but then realized how silly that was. I was looking at a woman who was being rude to me. I quickly put that thought aside and went to get my vehicle registration. The officer was making us wait. I thought he was checking Rebecca's license plate because my car was hidden under the big SUV. I leaned against the back of my old car and waited. So, do you drink often during the week? Rebecca asked as she stepped closer to me. I figured she felt just as uneasy as I did with the flashing police lights all around us. I wasn't sure if I wanted to tell her about my life. I didn't think she was a kind person, but I was getting tired of feeling negative about others. It was a kind of celebration, I said. I usually don't drink very much. I realized I had shared too much. Is it a birthday? Rebecca asked with a gentle smile. That smile annoyed me. It was nice and made her seem friendly. I felt my guard go up, something I had been doing for 4 years. Being nice felt like a mask she wore. Listen, I said more firmly than I intended. We're not going to be friends. You're really making this hard for me. Just be glad I'm not pushing back. Her face looked shocked. Her eyes darted away from mine quickly. She took a small step back, then turned and hurried to her car. She leaned against it, not looking at me. I told myself that Rebecca was the one who caused all this. Then I called myself a jerk. But then I remembered that she hit my car and forced me to take the blame. Maybe I should have just gotten a cab from the bar. She did take my jeans, but she wasn't honest about the lights. I couldn't tell if the light was green because I was busy looking at my phone. I decided to focus on her smile. No one smiles like that unless they have a trick up their sleeve. I thought she was mostly to blame, but I knew I wasn't innocent either. I took some of the fault for being a jerk. At least she would see that I wasn't totally fooled. The officer got out of his patrol car and put on his hat. He leaned it forward and then moved it a little to the left and right. I could tell he thought a lot of himself. He walked closer to Rebecca, so I started to move in that direction too. "Stay with your car, sir," the officer said, raising his hand. "I will talk to her first." I didn't like the thought of Rebecca talking without me. I felt it might confuse things between us. Plus, I had sort of told her to go away. I started to worry if I would have to take a sobriety test. The officer and Rebecca talked for a while. I couldn't hear them, but I noticed her waving her hands towards me in my car. Then she pointed down the street. She nodded a few times and shook her head at some questions. At one point, she looked like she was asking for help, but then she seemed to give up. She turned away from the officer and put her hands behind her back. When she looked at me, she silently said, "I'm sorry," as the handcuffs clicked around her wrists. I had never seen someone I knew get arrested before. I tried to step forward, but the police officer stopped me again. "Stay by your car, sir. I will talk to you soon." He took Rebecca back to his car and put her in the back seat. I thought I was next. She must have said something about the beer. Why else would she feel bad? But why would he take her away? I stood there in the middle of the road feeling foolish in my Ghostbusters underwear. "Mr. Richardson?" the officer asked as he walked up to me, looking at my name in his notebook. "Yes," I replied. "I'm going to need your license, registration, and proof of insurance," he said. He took out a metal clipboard, took my documents, and placed them under the clip. "I can give you a report in about 15 minutes, and then you can be on your way." "There are tow trucks coming," the officer said. He walked to the front of my car to check my license plate number. "Why did you take Miss Morrison into custody?" I asked. "She is driving with a limited license," the officer replied, still focused on his clipboard. "It's only for going to and from work." He moved closer with a flashlight to see my vehicle's identification number through the windshield. "She will face charges for careless driving because of this crash. That and breaking her court rules puts her in serious trouble." He looked at me and said, "Please wait a moment while I check your details. I'll give you a copy of my accident report for your insurance." "Don't you want to hear my side of what happened?" "It's not needed," the officer replied. "Miss Morrison has said it was all her fault. Texting while driving leads to more accidents than you might think." He shook his head and walked back to his car. He paused and turned to me, saying, "I'm curious about why you're in your underwear." "Oh, I just wanted some tacos," I stammered. "I was going to go to the drive-thru. I didn't think I'd get into an accident." "Nobody thinks they will," he replied with a slight smile and walked on. I glanced at the police car, but I couldn't see Rebecca inside. I felt bad for snapping at her earlier. I realized it was unfair that she was taking the blame for what had happened. She was at fault, but her smile was genuine. I realized that now. She could have used my drunk driving against me, but instead she said she was sorry. I must admit I was mostly to blame for being rude. I should have just gone straight home. Then the tow trucks came, 2 big flatbeds with machines to lift the cars. I watched as the drivers made space between the vehicles by bouncing on my back bumper. I thought they would have a more complicated way to do it. I took my phone from the car just before Ralph, the driver of the truck that was going to take my car, pulled it onto the flatbed. Once both vehicles were loaded, they quickly went around the street to pick up the broken pieces. The officer came back just as the tow truck drivers were finishing. "Here is a copy of the first report. It has Miss Morrison's contact details, her insurance information, and the contact details for the owner of the SUV. I've attached my card on top in case there are any problems." "She doesn't own the car?" "No," the officer replied. "I don't have the insurance information for the car yet." He returned my license, registration, and insurance card to me. "What will happen to her?" I asked, nodding toward his car. "Miss Morrison will be taken to the county jail," the officer said. "She'll stay there for the night and will likely be able to pay bail in the morning." I felt awful. I knew I shouldn't, but I couldn't help it. I misunderstood the smile. I needed to let it go. It wasn't my fault she ran into me. Why did I feel so bad about her possibly going to jail? It was the Barrow effect. I thought she was mean, just like my ex. But now all I saw was her need for help and then giving up. I made her give up. I would have felt better if she had stayed mean. At least then I wouldn't blame myself for the crash I didn't cause. Ralph took me and my car back to his garage. It was a small shop with a big fenced yard full of broken-down cars lined up in a row. Mine was at the end of the line. While he unloaded my car, I called my insurance company to set up a rental for the next day. Carl, looking tired with red eyes, came to pick me up and take me home. He thought my outfit was really funny, and I knew he would tell this story many times in the future. It was almost lunchtime. I spent all morning in meetings and found it hard to pay attention. To be honest, most of the meetings didn't really require much attention. Lately, our work gatherings mostly seemed like a chance for people to show off what they were doing or pretend they needed advice. This morning's meeting was just about setting up more meetings. That's my life at Bradford Insurance and Casualty. I earned a good salary for designing and improving databases. Most of my work was focused on making queries faster. It's not a topic that gets people excited at parties. Over the years, my job had become simple, almost automatic. I was good at it, like riding a bike. Other people didn't know much about the work, which helped me earn a nice paycheck every 2 weeks. 2 things in my life broke my usual routine. One was Linda Barrow, who always caused trouble. Thankfully, that was done now. The other was the accident from last night. It kept me wandering in my thoughts during the meetings. I still wasn't sure how to judge my own behavior. I couldn't accept that none of it was really my fault. Rebecca had made things complicated. Whenever I thought it was her fault, I remembered her smile. It seemed like a clever way to get what she wanted, but it felt warm, not mean. I could almost see her lips say sorry to me. I realized I had upset her more than she had damaged my car. When I went back to my desk, I gave in to my own feelings of guilt. I found the number for the county jail online, and after 3 tries, I finally called it. I wasn't sure what I would hear, but I needed to know Rebecca was okay. I probably would never see her again anyway. County Corrections, how can I help you? The voice was nicer than I thought it would be. I expected a sad tone, something full of gloom. Hi, I said, trying to gather my thoughts. I had never called a jail before. I'm calling about Rebecca Morrison, I said, hearing the sound of someone typing. How can I help you, sir? The friendly voice asked again. I felt uncertain. Why did I even call? I wanted to check if Miss Morrison has posted bail, I answered. That was what was on my mind. I needed to know if things were as bad as they seemed last night. No, sir, the voice said. Miss Morrison is still here with us. Oh, no. Why did I call? Instead of feeling better, I felt even worse. I let out a sigh and chose to go deeper into my thoughts. Can I talk to her? I asked. I can pass along a message for you, sir. The voice sounded like it was used to these kinds of requests. She will get back to you. I wasn't really sure she would. No, thank you, I said and hung up. I took a deep breath and looked out my window. I had a clear view of the parking lot, but I didn't really pay attention to it. It took me 7 years to get an office next to a window, and now I just never thought about it. It's not my fault, I reminded myself as I got up. This is just silly, I muttered softly to myself when I got into my car. I'm really foolish, I said out loud as I drove toward the county jail. I want to pay bail for Rebecca Morrison, I said to the clerk at the window. The waiting room, if that's what it was, had plastic chairs that looked like the ones from the DMV. They were arranged in 2 rows, as if many people would be waiting, but I was the only one there. The clerk pointed to a door on the side and pressed a button under his desk. I heard a buzzer, then a click as the lock opened. I pushed the door open without waiting for any more instructions. Cattle are taught in different ways. It was like a bank, with a line of teller windows next to each other, each marked with a sign saying, "Next window." Only one window was open, but there was no clerk there. I stepped up and waited. This was a big change from the friendly phone call I had earlier. My feelings about the place dropped a lot. After a few minutes, a short woman with gray hair walked over. "How can I help you?" the woman asked. Her hairstyle reminded me of my grandmother's, all curly and perfectly round. I figured she spent a lot of her government paycheck to keep it that way. "I want to post bail for Rebecca Morrison," I said again, just to be clear. The woman looked down and pulled out a form from below the counter. She typed a few things on her keyboard and nodded. Then I heard a printer start working behind her. She gave me a pen and slid the form across the table. "Please fill in all the details above this line," she said, pointing at a thick black line near the bottom of the page. She picked up the paper from the printer and came back to me. "It costs $3,000, paid in cash, money order, or with a credit card." My heart skipped a beat. I had been thinking it would only be a few hundred. I tried not to show my surprise as the woman watched me closely. I should have asked while I was on the phone. "Sure," I said as I took my wallet from my back pocket. I gave her my credit card, trying to keep my hand from shaking. This was a really bad idea. "There is a 5% service fee on credit cards," she told me. I saw that she took the card before she told me. I did some quick math in my head. $150, and I wasn't even sure if Rebecca would back out on the $3,000. I felt really foolish. I filled out the form as the woman processed my card. My hand was unsteady and my left eye kept twitching. I had to write my name, address, phone number, and my relation to the person in jail. I wasn't sure what to write for my relation. Friend didn't feel right since I had told her I wasn't. Family definitely wasn't correct. So I went with acquaintance, which seemed to fit the best. I smiled and wrote down the word victim. Why not? Next, I had to sign at the bottom. This meant I understood that if Rebecca didn't come to her court dates, the money would be lost. I was in, so I signed my name. The woman came back to me, had me sign a receipt, and then she stapled that along with the printed paper to my form. She grabbed an official stamp, pressed it at the bottom of the form, and signed her name. She picked up the paper from the printer and read it. "Please have a seat in the waiting room," she said, pointing toward the door I had just come through. "Miss Morrison will be with you soon." Then she walked into a small room where another worker was busy with a stack of papers. That was the fastest $3,000 I had ever spent. I went back to the waiting room and sat in one of the plastic chairs. I waited for 20 minutes until a buzzer rang and a door at the end of the room opened. Rebecca stepped out slowly, her eyes puffy and her blonde hair messy. She had not slept well. I stood there feeling anxious about what to say. I didn't have good reasons for why I had foolishly helped her. "You paid my bail?" she asked, stopping about 10 feet away from me. I noticed the worry in her eyes. Maybe she thought I wanted something from her. "It didn't feel right," I said, struggling to explain. "I can't say why, but I didn't want you to stay in there all day." She tilted her head a little, thinking about my words. "You're going to court, right?" I asked, my thoughts still on the $3,000 that felt like a heavy weight. I realized that might not have been the best thing to ask. I saw her eyes start to fill with tears, and I wished I could take back what I had said. Rebecca stepped closer to me, her bottom lip shaking. She stepped close to me and wrapped her arms around me in a hug. "Thank you for not being upset with me," she said, and then she started to cry. I had no choice but to hold her tight. It had been a long time since I comforted someone. I felt a bit lost. I couldn't find the right words to say. She felt like a stranger to me, and it seemed like her tears were about more than just being in trouble. There was something much deeper that was bothering her. I should not have come. She really needed her own Carl. "Can I give you a ride home?" I asked quietly. Being so close felt awkward, and I wanted to get back to work. Rebecca wiped her eyes and stepped back. It felt odd without her arms around me. Maybe I should have waited a little longer to say something. "I'm sorry for last night," Rebecca said. She looked truly sorry in her hazel eyes. "I was feeling lost and thought, I don't know what I was thinking. I don't usually act this way." She smiled a little, but it wasn't a strong smile. It felt more like she was saying sorry. "I wasn't good either," I replied. "The last thing I said to you was wrong. I was actually saying sorry to the woman who bumped into my car. I felt spineless. Maybe Linda had taken my courage away when I wasn't paying attention. "I need to get back to work. Can I give you a ride somewhere?" I asked again. "I'm not sure," Rebecca said. "Maybe my sister's house." Her maybe made me uneasy. She must have noticed the confusion on my face. "I was staying with a friend," she explained. She looked shy and her cheeks were a bit pink. "That was her SUV last night. She isn't answering my calls." "Homeless?" Things were worse than I had thought. "Your sister, then," I said with a pretend smile, pointing to the door. The sooner I could drop her off, the better I would feel. I had already helped and felt better about myself. Now it was time to stand my ground. Rebecca smiled and walked towards the door. I opened it for her. I tried not to think about how good she looked in her jeans. I needed to be a bit braver. As we walked, Rebecca took out her phone and looked at it. "My phone's out of battery," she said. "I couldn't charge it last night." I smiled, wanting to help her, and took out my phone. I typed in my code. "Thank you," she said as I gave it to her. She laughed while trying to type in the number. I can't remember the last time I needed her number. "It's tough to be without your contact list," I replied. I got to the car and unlocked the doors, opening the passenger side for Rebecca. She paused before getting in, raising one hand to me while holding her phone to her ear with the other. I waited as she listened closely. "Cathy, it's Becca. I need to stay with you for a few days. Please call me back as soon as you get this," Rebecca said before ending the call. "She isn't picking up at the moment," she said, looking a bit worried. I felt the same way. Rebecca reached to give me my phone, but accidentally hit the side of the car door with it. Her eyes grew wide when it slipped from her grip. It rolled away and landed screen down on the pavement. The noise it made was not good at all. "Oh, no!" Rebecca exclaimed as she bent down to grab it. I shut my eyes, knowing that awful sound meant something bad. "Oh, no," Rebecca said again, flipping the phone in her hand. "I'm really sorry." Her voice sounded tight. I opened my eyes. The screen of my new phone had a deep crack running across it from one corner to the other. The top corner had tiny cracks showing where it had first hit. "I didn't mean to," she began. "I know," I replied too loudly. Rebecca flinched at my tone. "I know," I said softer. She held the phone out to me, her hand trembling. I breathed in deeply and took the item from her. I pressed the button, and a mix of strange colors filled the screen. It was impossible to read. "I should stay here," Rebecca said as she started to step back. "I'll call my sister from inside," she added, pointing to the door we had just come out of. I noticed tears starting to form in her eyes. I felt really bad, and my phone was broken. I realized that she was bringing me trouble. It was my mistake for thinking I had to help her this morning. "No," I said softly. I placed the broken phone in my pocket. "I'm not going to leave you here." It was just a phone, and I had broken others before. I stepped aside and motioned for Rebecca to get in, but she stayed still. Tears streamed down her face as she looked at me. "I know you didn't mean to break it. It's just a phone," I said softly. "It happens all the time," Rebecca sobbed. She turned around and walked back to the building, covering her face with her hands. I felt a mix of worry and frustration. I hurried to catch up with her. "Rebecca, please don't just stand there. Leaving her by the prison would ruin the whole point of getting her out." She looked at me, her face stained with tears. "I damaged your car and your phone, and I'm not sure if I can get your jeans back." Those jeans were my favorite. I pushed that thought away. "They weren't new," I said to make her feel better. "The car and phone are covered by insurance. They were just mistakes." "I feel like a big mistake," Rebecca said, crying again. For the second time in less than 10 minutes, I let her lean on me. I held her close in the middle of the parking lot. This time I held her a little tighter. "Listen," I said, feeling a bit foolish. "I need to get back to work. I'll take you to my house. I still have a phone you can use to call your sister and fix things." I wasn't sure why I wanted to help Rebecca. She just seemed honest, and I felt I could trust her. It wasn't the way she reacted when she thought I was upset with her last night. She sniffled and let go of me first. I held on a little longer. "I'm not sure that's a good idea," Rebecca said. She wiped her tears and looked at me. "It would be better for you if you stayed away." "Nope," I said honestly. "I would feel better knowing you are okay and not waiting alone in this room." I was already too involved to back away now. I need to take care of what I've invested in. I smiled to make the message sound nicer. She returned a small smile, which was good. It was much better than if she had been crying. At least I was trying to be kind. "All right, but just until I can reach my sister," Rebecca said. I smiled once more and helped her into the car. After closing the passenger door, I walked around the car, calling myself a fool quietly to myself. I understood this wasn't the best choice, but I pushed myself to do it by coming here in the first place. "Why did you help me?" Rebecca asked slowly as I drove out of the parking lot. That question had no easy answer. Perhaps she was just as puzzled as I was. "Why did you tell the officer the truth last night?" I asked her back. "I didn't feel good about myself after you raised your voice at me," Rebecca replied. "Getting arrested felt better than thinking you were angry with me." I didn't expect her to be so honest. I thought she would avoid answering, just like I had. "Why did they take you in?" "The officer told you that you have a limited driving license, but they usually just give a ticket or something like that." Rebecca stared at her feet, and I immediately wished I hadn't asked. I was ready to talk about something else when she spoke again. "Strange things happen to me," Rebecca said in a mysterious way. "I know they are my mistakes, like with your phone. It's just not planned. It happens more than you think." She wiped her hands on her jeans and nervously tugged at a loose thread on her pants. "I shouldn't be the one driving." When she looked at me, I could see sadness in her eyes. "I'm really sorry about what happened last night. Not just the crash, but also trying to blame you for it." She sounded truly sorry. "There are many accidents," I replied, feeling a bit foolish. I turned my focus back to the road. For some reason, I started paying more attention to how I drove. "Is it all right if I don't tell you how many?" Rebecca asked quietly. I could sense she felt shy. It didn't really matter to me how many. I was only seeing one person. I changed the topic. "I was celebrating the end of my own mistake last night," I said, finally responding to the question Rebecca had tried to ask before. I glanced over and saw that she looked relieved I didn't ask her about her past. It was a really long divorce, and it ended on a sour note. She stayed quiet while I talked, but her eyes were locked onto mine. "I wasn't ready for anyone, especially a woman, to treat me the way you did last night. I'm sorry if I came on too strong." "I was mean," Rebecca said, looking down at her jeans. "I'm not very good at it. I broke down when you said I was. I never said that. You thought it, and you were right." I glanced at her as she played with her jeans again. "I helped you out because I felt bad for thinking you weren't nice," I confessed. Her gaze met mine. "I'm not great at being unkind," I said, and we shared a small smile. I turned my focus back to the road and we stayed quiet for a bit. "My house burned down," Rebecca said suddenly, without any background. "I have been living with friends, but the last one might not talk to me again." I glanced at her and she was staring right at me. I'm not a good person to be around. I really wanted to ask her about her house burning down, but it felt wrong to bring it up. "I probably lost my job for not going to work today. The best thing that has happened to me in a long time is that the man I bumped into helped me get out of jail." I was shocked by what Rebecca had shared. I didn't know how to react to something like that. I thought Linda had messed up my life, but I realized I had it better than Rebecca. At least I had Carl with me. Thinking it was a good idea, I reached out my hand to Rebecca. Slowly, she put her hand in mine. "I could use a friend too," I said softly. I noticed her relax in her chair. Her shoulders weren't so tense anymore. I wasn't as cheerful or outgoing as Carl, but I could still be there for her. Her hand felt nice in mine. I didn't want to let go of the steering wheel when I needed to turn. I drove into my driveway and hoped silently that my house wouldn't catch fire. "You have a lovely home," Rebecca said, but her tone made it seem like a bad thing. She looked scared, and that started to make me uneasy. I pushed the thought away. I didn't want to start believing in luck, whether good or bad. She was a nice person who just had some tough times. Surely that had to change eventually. My house was small, more like a cozy little place for one. The house was 30 years old and had some updates. It had an open kitchen with a counter that had stools where I often ate. On the other side of the counter was a big room with a flat-screen TV, a fireplace, and a mix of cozy furniture. There were 2 bedrooms, but one was mostly a home office now. There was also 1 bathroom with a shower. Next to the garage was a small mudroom that held the smallest washer and dryer I could find. Anything bigger, and I wouldn't have been able to open the garage door. "That is beautiful," Rebecca said as she stepped back from my favorite thing. On the wall, across from the big TV, I had a large 210-gallon saltwater fish tank. It took me years to learn how to manage the salt and waste problems. Now, it looked just right. I had added light blue rocks at the bottom, with natural and fake coral growing in different ways. The fake coral made little spots for the smaller fish to hide in. A gentle light covered everything in a warm blue glow. My lionfish swam slowly near the bottom, its bright fins moving gracefully. Taking care of the tank helped me stay strong during the divorce. It felt like a calming movie that always played. "This is my special pet," I said with a happy smile. "That's Mufasa swimming down there." Rebecca looked at me with a puzzled expression. "Okay, I like cartoons. You can blame me if you want." Rebecca grinned. Her smile was really nice. I picked up a pen and some paper from the kitchen counter. I wrote down my office number and, thinking ahead, added my home phone number for her too. "This is my office number and this is my home number," I said as I slid the paper to her. "I'm already running late, so make yourself at home. There's some food in the fridge and you can find clean towels in the closet next to the bathroom. Take care of yourself, but please call or leave a note when you leave so I know you're all right." Rebecca smiled at me as she sat on a stool and read my note. "Thank you, Damon. I'm really happy it was you I met last night." Her words were nice, but they sounded a bit off. Her smile faded, and she looked at me with worry. "You know what I mean? If I had to meet someone—" "I understand," I chuckled. "I feel the same way." Her beautiful smile returned. "I'm late," I said to her as I rushed out the door. "Thank you," Rebecca called after me as I left. I was running behind for work, driving a borrowed car, my phone wasn't working, and my favorite jeans were missing. I had only known her for a short time. Why didn't I dislike her? More meetings. I barely made it to the first one on time, and another had been added during my lunch break. At least the second one didn't have me looking at a boring presentation. I actually contributed during the last meeting. Every night, a big batch job created by someone was taking too long to finish. I took a look at it, created a better index, split it into 2 smaller tasks, and turned it into a job that took only 30 seconds. That's pretty good for working through a couple 100 million rows. To me, it seemed easy. But to the person who made the original query, I was a hero. His first try took over 3 hours, which meant it was running through lots of data and making many temporary tables. I accepted the thanks, but kept my methods to myself. Sometimes I could be a real jerk. I was sitting at my desk around 3 when the phone rang. "Damon Richardson," I said. "Damon, it's Rebecca." I felt a knot in my stomach and let out a breath. I didn't hear any sirens, so maybe my place wasn't in trouble. "I can't get a hold of my sister. I've tried a lot, but she hasn't called back. Can you take me to a hotel when you get back?" I relaxed my jaw and moved it a bit. The thought of her still at my house wasn't a bad idea. It was actually quite nice. "How about you cook dinner and stay the night?" I suggested. "I have 2 bedrooms. "Dinner?" Rebecca replied. She didn't sound too thrilled about it. "Yes," I said. "There's some pasta in the cabinet above the dishwasher and jars of sauce next to it." I thought boiling water was pretty safe. I pushed away any worries from my mind. She would be fine. "Are you sure?" "I've been here longer than I should have," I thought, smiling a little to myself. Maybe it wasn't long enough after all. "I don't know about you, but I'm really hungry," I said cheerfully. "I missed lunch, and it would be great to have a hot meal waiting for me when I get home." Suddenly, I felt like I was chatting with my ex again, back when things were easier. My mind was a bit mixed up. "All right, I can make spaghetti," Rebecca said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. It made me smile too. "What time will you be home?" She sounded like a wife asking. "About 5:30. "I'll see you then," Rebecca said happily. I was going to hang up when I heard her voice one more time. "Damon, do you have an old t-shirt I can wear? I'd like to take a shower and clean my clothes. Check the bottom left drawer of the dresser in my room." "Thanks." Why did I feel so glad she would be home when I got there? So far, knowing her had been hard. It had been about 3 hours since she broke my phone. Maybe this was the end of our troubles. One could always hope. I left work a bit early and took my broken phone to the shop. They told me they could switch the SIM card and set up a new phone in about 20 minutes. Waiting 20 minutes in a phone store feels like forever. I told them I would come back in the morning. For what I pay for the warranty, you would think they would have a phone ready to go, just in case. When I walked into the house, the first thing I noticed was a delicious smell. It was spaghetti, but not the kind from a jar. This one smelled like it had real taste. Rebecca was smiling in the kitchen. She looked great in my Stay Puffed Marshmallow Man t-shirt. I couldn't help but laugh when she gave a little spin to show it off. It was a bit brief, but it had everything important. "I found your spice rack," Rebecca said with a smile. "I added some extra flavor to the sauce. It smells great." Everything looked fine and there were no fires. I wasn't really worried about a mess, but it was good that there wasn't one. "Is that bread I smell?" "Yep. It's homemade bread," Rebecca said as she looked into the oven. It was clear that she wasn't finished yet because she shut the door and went back to stirring the sauce. "What's hillbilly bread?" I asked, curious. Rebecca turned to me and smiled. "It's just plain white bread with some butter, garlic salt, and a little cheese on top. It goes really well with spaghetti." I thought that was the nice smell filling the kitchen. "That's clever," I said. "My sister used to make it for me when I was a kid," Rebecca replied as she looked in the oven again. This time she put on an oven mitt and took out a pan of toast. It was a warm brown with hints of yellow mixed in. She turned off the oven, which I felt was a great sign. "I think it's time. What do you want to drink?" "How about some wine? I have a few bottles and never get to enjoy them. There are wine glasses up above the stove." I immediately regretted my words. Rebecca turned and stretched up to reach the cupboard. In my mind, I pictured broken glass on the stove as she balanced on her tiptoes. I nearly spoke, but then my eyes wandered. The broken glass didn't matter to me anymore. If you took something charming and colored it blue, it still wouldn't match the view I had in front of me. Rebecca's shirt had slipped up, showing part of her back. She wore soft blue panties that covered her well. Her legs looked strong and highlighted her shape. I felt a rush of feelings and didn't want to shake it off. My eyes couldn't keep up when she came down with the glasses. I felt embarrassed when I realized someone had seen me looking. I thought I would see a mean look or some disappointment. Instead, she had a big smile and bright eyes. "Would you like some wine?" she asked, holding up the 2 glasses she had brought. I shook off my surprise, smiled back to show I was sorry, and walked to the liquor cabinet. "Is white Zinfandel okay?" I asked. I also had red wine, but I thought it might be too strong for her taste. "That's great for me. You can pick anything you want tonight," she said. I turned around quickly, feeling lighter. I was pretty sure she had said anything. She had her back to me, stirring the sauce. I thought she was being playful. I closed my eyes and thought about the blue panties I remembered. I really hoped she was being playful. Dinner went well. We chatted about funny things, and I avoided any talk about accidents or anything that could spoil our fun. It had been years since I'd enjoyed a nice evening with a woman. I felt warm and cozy. I had really missed that feeling. Linda had caused more trouble than I first thought. "Why do you have a fish tank?" Rebecca asked as she took a sip of her wine. I glanced at my aquarium where Mufasa, my big fish, was swimming up a coral hill. "It was a way to cope," I replied honestly. "Everything was falling apart during the divorce, so I wanted to create something new." I turned back to Rebecca, who was looking at me closely. "If you look closely, you can see a little orange and white fish swimming in and out of the small caves. I named him Linda after my ex. He's a clownfish." "I trust you," Rebecca smiled. "But I have no plans to go near that tank." "Are you scared of fish?" I asked, confused. "They should be scared of me," Rebecca chuckled. "The tank looks nice, and I want it to stay that way." I glanced at her with worry. I think she really felt like something bad was happening to her. "You know," I started to say, but then the phone rang. "It must be my sister," Rebecca said as she hurried to answer it. I silently wished it wasn't her. "Hello," she said, pausing for a moment. "Who is calling?" At least it wasn't her sister. Rebecca put her hand over the part of the phone where you speak and whispered, "It's Linda Barrow." "My ex," I said softly. "I don't want to talk to her." I made a face like it hurt to think about it. Rebecca smiled and nodded. "I'm sorry. He can't come to the phone right now," she said. The way she spoke sounded a bit playful. She smiled at my confused look while listening to Linda's answer. "No, he's, just fine. Why don't you try calling back in about an hour? Actually, make that 2. She hung up, sounding a bit flustered. I began to laugh. "She'll see right through it," I said, still giggling. Doesn't matter, Rebecca replied, smiling with confidence. She's a woman. Just knowing there's another woman here to trick her will make her upset. I laughed again. She was right. Linda would feel jealous. I felt a bit bad for liking the idea, but I couldn't help it. Your insurance company called her because they thought it was your number, Rebecca said. She wanted to check if the accident was serious. Knowing Linda, I bet she was hoping for something much worse. Well, you did a great job, I said, raising my wine glass to her, and the food was excellent. She smiled again. I walked around the counter and began to gather the dishes. We quickly got into a routine of cleaning together. I washed while Rebecca dried. We ended up touching each other a bit more than we needed to. I liked being close to someone again. I realized I had only known Rebecca for a short time, and most of our time together had been tough. She began to hum softly while drying, looking relaxed next to me. I thought about whether I was seeing things clearly. I hadn't spent time with a woman in a while, and I found Rebecca quite pretty. Actually, I thought she was beautiful. Linda popped into my head. I used to think she was really pretty, and she didn't have many issues. After we cleaned the dishes, Rebecca took the full trash bag out of the can and tied it up. "In the garage?" she asked, lifting the heavy bag. "Let me handle it," I said. "Tomorrow is pickup day, so I need to take the trash can out to the curb anyway." "I can take it out," Rebecca said with a smile. "It's the least I can do." I shrugged and let her do the work. "Thanks." Rebecca hummed as she walked to the garage and pressed the button to open the door. There was a loud snap, then a big crash that echoed through the house. I stood still for a moment, shocked, until Rebecca's shout pulled me back to reality. I hurried to the garage. The washer and dryer were tipped forward in the utility room. A big metal spring was sticking out of the wall and had made a big dent on the top of the dryer. Rebecca was on her knees in the garage, crying. A light dust filled the air. The garage door was hanging low on one side and had fallen down to the ground on the other. The old spring on the right side broke and crashed against the wall. "I'm so sorry," Rebecca said, her head in her hands. She was moving back and forth in a strange way. "Are you all right?" I asked as I crouched down beside her. That broken spring could have seriously hurt her. "I'll go," Rebecca said. "I don't want to break anything else." She kept rocking, and it worried me a lot. I put my arm around her and tried to pull her close, but she pushed me away, so I let go. "You didn't do anything. The thing just broke," I said, trying to help her stand up. She was shaking a lot, and I noticed blood on the right side of her forehead. "You're hurt. Come inside and let me see it." She looked up at me, her eyes filled with tears. I could see how sad she was, and it really upset me. That feeling bothered me more than my car trouble, my ripped jeans, or my broken phone. I really wanted to wipe away her sadness. I didn't know what to do, so I gently held her face in my hands and kissed her. Her lips were soft, and I could sense her sorrow. I didn't know what I was trying to say, but I didn't mean to stay for so long. My hands slowly moved into her hair while I found it hard to pull away. I could feel her give in, and I tasted her tears as she leaned closer to me. Her kiss grew firmer, and her hand rested on the back of my neck. I wanted to stay there, in my old garage. I damaged your place," Rebecca said softly, almost like a secret. "My place almost hurt you. I would have set it on fire if it had," I replied. Rebecca held on to me even tighter. "I don't want to sleep in the other room," she whispered in my ear. I could feel her warmth next to me. Forget about the old garage. I invited her inside and shut the door. I noticed the big spring sticking out of the wall. It was stuck there. I set Rebecca down on the couch. My kiss had made her stop crying, but she still looked upset. I grabbed a washcloth and some antiseptic spray. Then I filled a glass with water and sat beside her. I gently had her lie down, resting her head on my lap. She did as I said without hesitating. She seemed to trust me completely. I wet the cloth and started to carefully clean the cut. It wasn't very deep, and there was nothing in it. Something must have flown off when the spring broke. Rebecca turned her head a little so I could help her better. I dipped the cloth into water again and wiped away the blood. The cut looked clean, so I covered her eyes and sprayed the medicine on it. She didn't even flinch. I softly blew on the spot, though I'm not sure why. It was something my mom used to do. "Things like this happen to me a lot," Rebecca said quietly. I ran my fingers through her hair and didn't ask her to sit up. I enjoyed taking care of her. It was kind of funny because I didn't want to look after anyone else. She turned away from me and curled up a bit, trying to get cozy. This made me smile. "I don't mind," I said quietly. I ran my fingers through her hair and she rested her arm over my knees. We stayed like that for a while, just enjoying the moment together. It felt nice. I hadn't felt at ease like this for a long time. "I lost my job today," Rebecca said, adding to her worries. "I called earlier and they told me I didn't show up for my shift." I kept playing with her hair. "The tips were bad, but it was a job." "You'll find another one," I told her. She snuggled closer to me. I felt like a comfort blanket. I was Carl, just a lot quieter and with more gentle touches. "I tried to call my friend Tammy on your phone." Rebecca was sharing everything. She hung up on me. "Most of my things are at her home. I think the SUV was the final problem." "The final problem?" I asked, feeling a bit slow. My curiosity was stronger than my care for her feelings. Rebecca turned around in my lap and looked up at me. "Can I keep it a secret for now?" Rebecca asked, looking sad. I felt bad for pushing her. "Just give me her number tomorrow," I said, changing the subject. "I'll try to get your things back." Rebecca managed a small smile. She was without a home and a job, and she felt like she brought bad luck. I knew I should leave, but even her small smile made me stay. She was so different from Linda, and that was part of what drew me in. I couldn't quite understand the other reason. She tilted her head down and then turned it to the side. Then she took my hand and placed it on her shoulder, holding it close to her. It felt warm, like a cozy blanket. "Thank you," Rebecca said softly. I kept holding her because she needed comfort. I held her because I needed it too. I didn't want to be anywhere else. I fell asleep right there. "Damon." Rebecca's voice surprised me. I opened my eyes to see her beautiful smile. She was lying back in my lap now. She reached up and wiped the side of my mouth. "Oh no, I was drooling." I lifted my head slowly. "Sorry," I said, using the back of my hand to wipe my lips. My legs felt numb. They were asleep. "What time is it?" Rebecca raised her head and glanced at the clock above the fish tank. "It's a little after 2. Let's go to your room," I replied. I nodded, but when I tried to get up, I struggled and just straightened my legs to help the blood flow. My mind was still a bit sleepy. She stood up and held out her hand. I took it and got up slowly, wiggling my head to ease the tightness in my neck. She stepped behind me and began to massage my neck gently. I leaned closer. "Our bed is this way," I said, walking slowly and holding her hands tight. I heard a soft laugh. I turned off the lights and moved carefully into my room, with Rebecca right behind me, her gentle touch relaxing me. I stopped by the bed and let out a yawn. A soft light from a street lamp came in through the thin curtains. I turned around, trying to remember if I had any pajamas because I hadn't worn them in a long time. I heard her moving around and then getting into bed. She moved closer and rested her arm over me. I felt her warmth and started to wake up. "Shh," Rebecca whispered. "Let's just sleep." She cuddled up to me, her warmth against my back. Her hand rested on me, gently touching my chest. I soon fell asleep again. My alarm, as always, was very annoying. I was in the middle of a strange dream, one that wasn't bad, but it quickly disappeared with the loud beeping sound. The sound was grating, like nails on a chalkboard. I reached over and hit the clock a few times until I found the snooze button. I rolled onto my back, still keeping my eyes shut, and the warm smell of coffee floated through the air. It was Rebecca. I sat up and turned off the alarm completely. I couldn't recall setting it up the night before. I spent some time digging through my closet to find my robe, the one I hadn't worn in ages. When there are no visitors, you don't worry much about being covered up. I stopped looking for my clothes after I couldn't find them. Instead, I put on the same pants I wore yesterday and a t-shirt. When I looked in the mirror, I saw my hair needed brushing. I decided not to worry about it and walked toward the smell of coffee. I leaned against the wall by the entrance to the big room. Rebecca was in the kitchen, focused on cooking something. Her robe looked much nicer on her than it ever did on me. I enjoyed watching her. She was so involved in what she was doing. I could hear her humming softly, and it made me smile. She seemed to notice. "Good morning," Rebecca said cheerfully. "Coffee and pancakes?" I didn't usually eat breakfast, but coffee sounded nice. "Yes, please," I replied, and sat down at the counter. "You woke me up," Rebecca nodded while pouring a cup of coffee. Do you want cream or sugar? Just black, I said, shaking my head. Rebecca handed me the cup with a smile. Everything felt so smooth and familiar. I remembered her mentioning that the tips weren't great. I thought she must have worked as a waitress. Thank you, I said. The coffee tasted good. It was strong enough to keep me awake, but not too bitter. I'm sorry about last night, Rebecca said. I set my coffee down and looked at her. She seemed genuine, but thankfully she didn't look as upset as she had before. I'm not, I replied. I think my answer surprised Rebecca. She seemed unsure of what to do with her hands all of a sudden. I liked having you close to me, I said quietly, hoping she would understand. She went back to cooking and flipped 4 small pancakes. When she turned to face me again, I could see she was feeling stronger. I struggle with relationships. They often go wrong, and I'm not sure I can handle it if you don't feel the same way, she said. I raised my eyebrows in surprise. I could sense that something special was beginning to grow between us, but she seemed focused on what might go wrong. She faced the pancakes cooking on the stove. Are you warning me? She pointed to the pan. I took another sip of coffee and watched her lift a pancake with the spatula to see if it was ready. What if I don't listen to you? I might make things hard for you, Rebecca said quietly. I couldn't help but let out a small laugh. She turned to me a bit annoyed. The garage is just the beginning, you know. Everything will be okay, then suddenly, you'll wish you never met me. I find it funny that you might mess up my life even more than my ex did, I said with a grin. I'd like to take that chance if you're willing. You might end up thinking I'm not worth much, too. I took another sip of my coffee while she thought about what I said. I noticed steam rising from the pancakes and pointed my cup at them. Rebecca turned and skillfully placed them onto plates. She placed the plates on the counter, along with the forks and spoons. It surprised me when you called it our bed last night, Rebecca said as she took the butter out of the fridge. What do you mean? Last night you were really tired, but you said our bed. I couldn't help but grin at my little mistake. I think I even drooled on you, I chuckled. I loved the smile Rebecca gave me. I can't be blamed for what I do when I'm still waking up. I put some butter on my pancakes. I wasn't very hungry, but she made the pancakes for me anyway. So you didn't really mean it? Rebecca joked a little. I paused, then thought, what the heck? I really liked that we shared our bed, I said proudly. I quickly shoved a pancake in my mouth, forgetting the syrup, to keep from talking more. Rebecca was struggling to hold back a smile. I could see she wanted to stay serious, thinking there were important things we still needed to talk about. At last, she decided to go for it. It was nice, wasn't it? Rebecca's smile was lovely. I nodded and reached for the syrup. The pancakes were tasty, but I really enjoyed sweet things. I made pancakes for dinner about once a month just to satisfy my sweet tooth. When I began to pour the syrup, she gently stopped my hand, leaned over the counter, and kissed me. I struggled to swallow my mouth full of pancake quickly so I could keep kissing her, but eventually I had to let her pull back. You want to do that again? I said cheerfully after I swallowed. Rebecca shook her head with a playful smile. I let her enjoy herself while I poured syrup all over my pancakes. I was hungrier than I expected. I need to take a couple of days off, Bob, I said on the phone. Bob Thorgan was a fair boss. I had some who were not so understanding, but Bob knew that when I worked well, it helped him too. The spring on my garage door broke and went right through the back wall. The door is stuck, and I need to fix it. I paused for a bit, watching Rebecca fidget. I could tell she was worried I might get in trouble at work. I can take care of that on Monday, but I want Susan with me. Last time I was left without any help. I listened for a moment. All right. See you Monday. I hung up and grinned. 4-day weekend? They just let you go without any warning? Rebecca asked, surprised. Yeah. Sometimes things come up that people need to handle, I replied casually. Rebecca must have had some tough jobs. They'll just take it from my vacation hours. I'll get paid for the time off either way. I opened the phone book and looked through the yellow pages for a nearby garage door company. Hanson's overhead door is very reliable, Rebecca mentioned. I looked up and noticed her face turning a bit pink. I've had a few that needed repairs, she said with a shy smile. I smiled to make her feel more at ease. Let's go with Hanson's, I said as I looked up their number and called them. When I explained the problem, they understood right away what was wrong. They told me they would come within the hour with a new spring part to replace the old one. I shared this news with Rebecca, who still felt like this was only happening to her. For the next hour, we worked together to remove the spring from the wall. It was a really messy job. We moved the washer-dryer into the big room to have more space to work. It only took a moment for the spring to get stuck in the wall, but it took us 15 minutes to get it out without damaging the wall too much. The spring kept getting caught on the drywall because it went in at a weird angle. Plus, it was heavier than I thought it would be. In the end, I ended up with a big 1-foot tear in my wall. I think I should feel relieved that it didn't damage any important parts. Hansons did a great job. They took the door apart, fixed the tracks, made a new frame for the spring system, and put the door back up. While they were working, I managed to get my rental car out of the garage. The door was a little crooked at the bottom left corner, but since it was a garage door, you couldn't really see it from the street. So I figured I could just let it be. "It's bent," Rebecca said with a sad face as she stared at the door. "You can barely notice it unless you get really close," I replied. "It's not that bad. You wouldn't know it was there unless someone told you. This house was old and had its own charm. It was okay for it to look like it had a story to tell." Rebecca shook her head slowly and then walked inside. I believed she would have liked it if no one knew about what happened. I stared at the door again, and the mark was all I noticed. Women. I hurried to catch Hanson's team before they left. They said someone from sales would reach out to talk about getting a new door or just a new panel if they could find the same style, which they thought was unlikely. The panels were as old as the house. I had a feeling I would need to buy a new door. Rebecca was costly to have around. "You were right," I said to Rebecca as I stepped inside. "I'm getting a new door." She gave me a strange look. "You did that for me?" "You said it looked bad," I explained. I took another look and agreed. I thought she would be pleased. Why did I ask for a new door? I could have been okay with the one that was bent. "It did look bad, but I thought you would keep it," Rebecca said. "You didn't like it, so I thought I should get a new one." "Are you trying to show off for me?" Rebecca asked. Her voice sounded a bit challenging, and it made me confused. I felt like she wanted to argue about fixing a door. I really didn't want to argue about that door. "Yes, I guess I was," I replied, trying to sound strong as I put my hands on my hips. Rebecca smiled and stepped closer. I noticed a twinkle in her eyes. "I'm really impressed," Rebecca said and gave me a kiss. This time I didn't have a mouthful of pancake. I wanted more than just a quick kiss, not after she had been playful earlier. I pulled her closer and our lips brushed softly at first, then pressed together, then connected. I felt her tongue gently touch my upper lip. I could feel her heart beating faster and warmth spread through me. "Oh," Rebecca said softly as she pulled away. "That was more than I thought." I wanted to hold her close right then. I paused, unsure if I could go on. It was something about how she was standing. I placed my hands on her hips gently, wanting to be close but careful. I didn't want to ruin the moment. "Did I go too fast?" I asked. "Maybe a little bit," Rebecca replied, sounding thoughtful. "I wanted to kiss you, but I didn't realize I liked it more than I thought. We've only known each other for a day." Watching her struggle with her words was cute. I could see the confusion in her eyes. I was just as much a mystery to her as she was to me. I let go of her waist. There was no worry about losing her at this moment. "I need to grab something at the hardware store to fix the wall. I'll also get my phone and check if I can pick up your things from Tammy's." I took a moment to think. "You know I'll be busy all day trying to impress you again," Rebecca said with a laugh. "I'll reach out to my sister again," she added, looking a bit serious for a moment. "I want to stay over tonight, even if I find her." "I would love for you to stay," I replied, enjoying her smile. This time I gave her a quick kiss. First, I drove to the phone store. It felt strange not having my phone with me. It didn't feel bad, but I missed having it with me. I felt a little strange without that small rectangle sticking out of my left pocket. I was the only customer in the shop. It was my first time there, and the young worker helped me before I even had a chance to greet him. "It's in the back, Mr. Richardson. Just give me a minute," he said, and then he went into the back room. I wandered around, looking at a display of phone cases. I had a phone case once, but I didn't like how heavy it made my phone feel. I smiled to myself, thinking a case might have protected my phone when Rebecca dropped it. I was heading toward the tablet section when my foot tripped on something. Without thinking, I pulled at it. I heard a loud screech, and I turned just in time to see a tall stand with lots of phone cases tipping over in slow motion. My weak try to catch it came far too late. When it fell, the blankets spread out on the floor like frightened mice. 3 workers came out from the back room, their faces showing surprise. My foot was still stuck at the bottom of the rack, and trying to set it back up only made things harder. "I'm sorry," I said quickly. "I don't know what went wrong." "Don't worry, Mr. Richardson," the tech guy said as he handed me my phone. "We'll handle this." His tone was a bit rude, and I didn't feel like I could argue back. He knelt down and untangled my shoelace from the stand. The other workers started to pick up the fallen cases. "I'm really sorry about this," I said again. He brushed me off without replying. I felt foolish. The other 2 didn't look at me. I decided to leave, feeling embarrassed all the way up my back. I stayed in my rental car for a bit, letting my emotions settle down. I understood some of how Rebecca felt. It was a hurt that ran deep, like a fire inside the mind. Rebecca must be feeling really hurt. I could help her, in my own way. At least I was happy to have my phone back. That reminded me to call Tammy. It was a short chat. For a moment, I thought Tammy might end the call, but she decided I could pick up Rebecca's things as long as Rebecca wasn't there. I found that a bit silly. I planned to tell Tammy how I felt after I had loaded Rebecca's things. I got the address and ended the call nicely. Tammy lived in an apartment building. Her place was in the back on the 4th floor. It was a secured building, and there was a guard at the entrance who made me show my ID to get in. I sensed there was money here, but I felt it was lost, trying to shut out the outside world. I parked in a guest spot near the door the guard pointed out as the best place. I had to talk into an intercom before Tammy let me in. Tammy was a big woman, not the kind who needed 2 plane tickets, but someone who truly enjoyed her food. She spent a lot on her hair, which was styled in tight curls and stuck in place. It looked like her light brown hair could withstand a strong wind without moving at all. She was older than Rebecca, but what caught me off guard was her warm smile. "How is Rebecca?" Tammy asked. I wasn't prepared for that question. I thought she wanted me to leave. "Upset," I said honestly. "She wants to talk to you about it." I almost went on a bit about being kind to others, but her friendly face made me stop. "Yeah, that's not really like me," Tammy replied. "Cathy felt it was better not to let Rebecca depend on me too much. She knew I would give in if I spoke with her again." "Cathy?" I asked, taken aback. What was happening? Cathy. Her sister. I couldn't reach Rebecca's phone 2 nights ago. After the insurance company called, I called Cathy. Something felt off, but I let it sit in my mind and followed Tammy into what looked like a spare room. The apartment was larger than my house. The walls seemed to have artwork that was more valuable than my whole house. "These 2 boxes belonged to her, and those 3 suitcases, too," Tammy said with a sigh. "It's not much to show for her life." She shook her head gently. "The fire really took away her motivation." I picked up the first box and moved toward the door. "Here, this will help you get back in." Tammy tucked her keycard into my back pocket since my hands were too full to hold it. I put the first box in the car trunk and went back inside the apartment. "So Cathy told you not to talk to Rebecca anymore?" I asked as I reached for the second box. "She believes Rebecca needs to learn how to take care of herself," Tammy replied, nodding her head. "Rebecca keeps getting into trouble, and people keep helping her out. I help the most." I lifted the box, unsure about that idea. "So you both were just going to leave her there?" I asked. "Leave her in jail? No one mentioned anything about jail." Her eyes grew big. "Oh, that poor girl. How long was she stuck there?" "Just 1 night," I replied as I walked toward the door. A little later, I returned for the suitcases. "I'll call Rebecca," Tammy said when I got back. I didn't know about the jail. It was the 3rd time something happened with one of my cars. I was a bit upset. I thought I would let Cathy handle it. "Tammy has been looking after Rebecca since they were young," she said, seeming a bit shy when talking about the jail situation. "I just hope the man Rebecca hit doesn't take me to court for a long time." The strong words she used didn't match what I knew about her. I could see she felt bad for not paying enough attention to Rebecca and was trying to explain herself. "Yeah," I joked. "I heard that guy is not very nice." The look on Tammy's face was worth a million smiles, but I struggled to keep a serious expression. I chuckled and said, "I'm not taking anyone to court. I just want to stay away from lawyers. I've had enough of that for a lifetime." "Did she hit you?" Tammy asked with a smile. "Yeah," I replied, lifting two of my suitcases. Without really thinking, I said, "Just a little tap." The words surprised me. It was just a common saying I misused. I rushed down to the car with my bags. When I came back for the last suitcase, I saw Tammy pouring 2 glasses of juice. "Sit down," Tammy said, pointing to a chair. There was a worried tone in her voice. "Please." I sat down as she passed me a glass of white wine and took a seat across from me. "Love tap?" "It's just a saying," I replied. The wine tasted nice. Tammy gave me a puzzled look. "Rebecca needs support, but I'm not sure if the guy she hit with her car is the right person." I felt confused and a bit annoyed. I set the wine down and got up to grab the last suitcase from the guest room. "Sorry, I didn't mean to say that," she said. "You think it's better to just ignore her, and now you want to question me," I replied, trying to stay calm. "I'm not sure if Rebecca needs friends like you." "Please," Tammy said, pointing to the chair. "You're right." I sat back down but left the wine where it was. "I just don't want her to get hurt." I shook my head. "I'm confused. She's grown up enough to make her own choices." I looked around the apartment, at the pictures on the walls and the nice furniture. "Why does it matter to you?" Rebecca seemed so different from Tammy. I felt like I was missing something, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to find out. "I was friends with her mother," Tammy said. "Really close friends. When she died, I promised to look out for Rebecca, that's all." "So you just stay away from her?" I wasn't sure I wanted to stick around any longer. Tammy leaned back in her chair and looked at me for a moment. "What do you do for work?" she asked, forgetting my question. "Excuse me?" I replied as I stood up again. "I think I'll just finish packing and leave." I didn't understand why she was suddenly asking me so many questions. It didn't make any sense, and I figured it was best not to know. I walked to the guest room and got the last suitcase. I gave Tammy the keycard as I walked out. "Please don't hurt her," Tammy said when she took the card. She seemed really worried. I noticed her eyes were more moist than usual. I almost told her again that she was the one causing the pain. But I decided not to say anything. I simply nodded and went to my car. She was a puzzling person. Next, I went to the hardware store. I spoke with someone who knew a lot about fixing things. Then I collected some joint compound, wood for furring strips, mesh drywall tape, and a small piece of drywall. I couldn't help but laugh because the small piece cost nearly as much as a full one. My skills at applying the compound were not great, but the hole was behind the washer and dryer. If it didn't look perfect, no one would see it. When I got home, the house smelled fresh like a pine forest. The kitchen was shining and tidy. I could see my reflection in the shiny handles of the kitchen tools. I called out to Rebecca, and I heard her soft voice from the bathroom. I went in and found her in the shower, cleaning the hard water stains that had built up over the years. "What are you doing?" I asked. Rebecca was wearing one of my old t-shirts, and I could tell she was working hard. She smiled when she saw me. "I'm just showing my thanks," she said. "Your bathroom could use a little cleaning," she said. "You don't need to do that," I replied, noticing how shiny the sink and spotless the toilet were. I couldn't recall the last time the shower doors looked this clear. "But if you want to, it does look really nice." I had to admit the bathroom was a bit messy before. I opened the shower door. "Thank you," I said, and gave her a soft kiss. A warm, soapy hand moved around my neck and brought me closer to her for another gentle kiss. I felt my heart racing again when her lips opened a little, and she brushed her tongue gently. I almost lost my balance stepping into the shower, and she pulled back, giggling. "Let me finish this," Rebecca said, giving me a quick kiss. Her smile faded as she looked into my eyes. "I want to spend the evening with you. It might be too early, but I don't mind." I smiled back, feeling my cheeks heat up more than they should have. I held back my impatience. "I'll start fixing the hole in the wall," I said as I stepped carefully out of the shower, "and do my best to focus on the work." I really liked the way Rebecca smiled with that playful look. I turned and walked back to the garage to unload the car. But all I could think about was her. She was more appealing as she grew more sure of herself. I kept trying to picture what was underneath her t-shirt. I remembered the warmth I felt when I held her hand last night. I thought about whether her underwear was still blue or if she had switched to a different color. My thoughts felt messy, and I found myself getting lost in them. I looked at the hole and cut a rectangular piece of drywall to cover it. I held the piece over the hole and drew around it with a pencil. Then I used a handsaw to make the hole bigger so the piece would fit just right. I cut 2 wooden strips a bit taller than the hole and fixed them to the inside of the wall on both sides. This made a frame to hold the piece in place. I carefully placed the piece into the hole and attached it to the wooden strips with screws. I felt really proud of what I had done. "You've done this before?" Rebecca asked, surprising me from behind as I worked. "Nope. The guy at the hardware store showed me how," I replied. I won't share what I was thinking before I spoke to him. "Looks good," Rebecca said with a smile. I wrapped mesh tape around the edges where the drywall patch met the wall. Just then, the phone rang. It was finally Rebecca's sister. "No, Cathy, I'm okay. No, I'm staying here tonight." She glanced up and smiled at me. I understood that smile. "Damon Richardson. No, he picked me up yesterday." Rebecca rolled her eyes as she spoke. "It's not what you think. No. Well, he's the man I bumped into." "No!" Rebecca pulled the phone away from her ear and shot me a look that clearly said she was annoyed with her sister. She listened for a little longer before covering the phone with her hand. "She wants to see you," she whispered. I raised my shoulders and nodded that it was fine. "Okay." Rebecca went back to talking. "Tonight?" She glanced at me again and I nodded, pointing to the kitchen counter. "How about dinner here?" Rebecca nodded and shared the address. After a moment, she sighed and ended the call. "Sorry about that. Cathy is a bit worried," she said. I smiled to show I didn't mind. "What should we make?" I asked. I didn't have much food for dinner. I could make pancakes, spaghetti, or canned chili, but those didn't feel right for the occasion. "Should we go shopping?" "I'll cook," Rebecca replied with a smile. With a long weekend ahead, I didn't need to rush to finish the hole today. I tidied up the area, hid the not-yet-finished hole behind the washer and dryer, and took Rebecca to the grocery store. Some women light up when you take them to a jewelry shop, and others get excited by a shoe store. But for Rebecca, the grocery store was the best place to be. As soon as the door opened, her face lit up. She didn't even look back at me when she pointed toward the shopping carts. I picked up one and followed her. Rebecca had a special talent for cooking, and I was her helper. It was really fun to watch her shop. She seemed to know exactly what she wanted. She picked out some lettuce, butterhead, and red leaf. I mentioned the easy bags that had lettuce already cut into nice pieces. Rebecca laughed, not really with me, but at me. She quickly gave me a light kiss to make things feel better. She picked out some red cabbage, raisins, walnuts, and a small box of raspberries. It wasn't the usual iceberg lettuce and ranch dressing I was used to, but I liked raspberries, so I decided to give this unusual salad a try. Next, we chose a 2-pound sirloin tip roast. She tossed in some cayenne pepper and olive oil. She told me I already had the other needed items at home. I was pretty sure I had A1 sauce, but I didn't think that's what she was talking about. We had to return to the salad dressing section because we forgot the red wine vinegar. I was focused on reading the label, trying to understand what made it special, when I felt arms wrap around me from behind. I felt a gentle kiss on my neck. "Thank you," Rebecca said softly. "For what?" I asked, hoping she would keep holding me. "Thank you for everything and for inviting my sister to dinner," Rebecca whispered, her voice warm against my ear as her hands rested on my chest. I nearly let the vinegar slip from my hands. I tried to turn around in her embrace, but she let go and stepped back with a playful grin. "You're just teasing me," I said, trying to be serious. "Yes," she replied, but her eyes seemed to say more. I chuckled as she took my hand and pulled the cart toward the checkout. She was looking at me, her gaze bright, as she steered the cart straight into a display, and a pile of cereal boxes fell over with a crash. Not just one or two, but the whole thing fell down. I saw the color leave Rebecca's face, and her confidence fade away. I thought it would pass quickly, but it lasted longer than a moment. I noticed the lines start to show around her eyes. Her body jumped when the thing hit the ground. People looked over, and Rebecca seemed to shrink away. It hurt to see those few seconds. I felt tightness in my chest and my throat. I knew I had to stop it. I wrapped my arms around Rebecca. She didn't resist when my lips touched hers. I wanted to be with her and help her forget everything else. In no time, the grocery store seemed to disappear. Her hands reached out and pulled me closer. I lost myself in the moment, her gentle lips meeting mine, creating a world that was just ours. She came back to me, feeling stronger and more vibrant. "Excuse me, sir," a man in a white coat called to me. I slowly pulled away from Rebecca. Her eyes were shining and my heart raced at the sight. I looked at the man, smiling wide. "Sorry, I got distracted," I said. "The cart slipped away from me." The man glanced at Rebecca and then back at me, smiling. Rebecca put her arm around my waist and leaned her head on my shoulder. It felt nice to have her close. "It's okay, sir," the man said, trying not to laugh. "If you pull the cart back, we can get this cleaned up." I pulled the cart back while the man gave me another look. It was a look that said I was lucky. Absolutely, I thought. The house smelled amazing. There was a wonderful aroma of meat cooking slowly in the air. I could feel my mouth watering, but Rebecca wasn't letting me into the kitchen. It was odd that I was allowing her to do this. I actually liked the fact that she had taken over and made the kitchen her own. I liked the strong and confident Rebecca. "That smells great," I said as I sat at the other side of the counter. "You would be a great chef." "That's my dream," Rebecca shared with a smile. "But I always end up waiting tables instead." It didn't sound sad. She was just saying what she thought. "Why not open your own restaurant?" I said, as Rebecca put the lettuce she was pulling apart into a large bowl. "I need money for that," Rebecca replied. "It takes around $500,000 just to build it, and about that much again to keep it running for the first year." She had really thought about it. I didn't know if I could help her get that much money. Maybe I could have before the divorce, but now I was just lucky to get a decent loan for a car. The doorbell rang and stopped our talk. Cathy was older than Rebecca, and I didn't notice much of a family look between them. When I said hello, Cathy had a serious face. It felt like she was judging me, and I was sure she would find faults. But when Rebecca came from the kitchen to greet her, Cathy's face lit up. There was something about Cathy that bothered me. I knew I would be checked out by her, but that wasn't the main issue. Something just felt wrong. When Rebecca showed up, I felt something change in the room. It didn't seem real to me. The way she acted around Cathy made me uncomfortable because they were quite different in age. I didn't like how Rebecca seemed to look up to her, changing the way she stood and moved. It wasn't a great start, but I decided to set aside my doubts and try to begin fresh. "I'm really happy you're here," I said with a smile. "Rebecca's cooking has been making my stomach growl for over an hour. I wasn't sure I could wait any longer." "She cooks for you?" Cathy asked in a sharp tone. Rebecca didn't seem to pick up on the mood, but I certainly did. "It's hard to stop her," I replied calmly. I was tired of trying to be nice. I realized that this dinner would take a while. I told myself to stay polite. I definitely didn't want to cause any trouble between Rebecca and Cathy. But I could tell Cathy didn't worry about me the same way. Rebecca took the roast out of the oven, and at that moment, I didn't care what Cathy thought of me anymore. It was a beautiful piece of meat. I realized I hadn't truly valued my oven before. Rebecca carefully lifted it out of the pot where it had been kept warm, using a big fork and knife. I could see how proud she was as she gave me the platter to carve. The seasoning she had added made the meat smell so good. I could almost taste it just by smelling. As I started to cut into the meat, I felt like my dad during Thanksgiving. The whole moment felt homey and comforting. I looked up at Rebecca, who was smiling at me. She wore my barbecue apron tied around her waist. The kitchen was spotless, and I remembered her tidying up the bathroom and getting groceries. Just 3 days had passed since my divorce was final, and I felt surprisingly at ease with another woman in my home. Rebecca noticed a change in my expression. I could see the worry forming on her face, so I pushed my thoughts aside and managed a smile for her. Cathy seemed unaware of everything. I sliced into the meat and was pleased to see it cooked just right. The meat was cooked just right, with a pink middle, and the flavors were amazing. I had to admit Rebecca really knew how to cook. I kept the A1 sauce in the fridge. So what do you do for a job? Cathy asked as we enjoyed our dinner. I was chewing when she spoke and the meat felt tender in my mouth. Maybe being at home wasn't too bad after all. I work at Bradford Insurance and Casualty, I replied when I could speak again. I'm part of the computer team. I usually didn't share much more than that. A longer explanation felt a bit dull. How long have you been at your job? Cathy asked more questions. I suppose since she was Rebecca's only family, she had the right to know. 9. No, 10 years now, I answered while mixing my salad. I was searching for more raspberries. The dressing Rebecca made paired nicely with the raspberries and nuts. It was a combination I never would have imagined. Do you want to do something more than just insurance? Cathy kept going. Rebecca caught me off guard when she took some more raspberries from their container and added them to my bowl. It was like she could read my mind. There's a job opportunity in that, I said, smiling at Rebecca to show my gratitude. I'm content where I am, so I don't see a reason to change. Must not pay well, Cathy said without holding back as she glanced around my small house. My first thought was that I might choke on my food. I took a step back and realized I had to tell her the whole truth. I didn't want her to hear it from someone else. I went through a long divorce, I admitted. It really hurt my finances, but everything is stable now. You were married? Cathy asked with a look of disapproval, glancing at Rebecca. She seemed to think Rebecca would be surprised, but Rebecca just gave a gentle smile and nodded. Yes, for 9 years, I answered, then quickly added, but we were separated for the last 4 years. It was settled just a few days ago. Wow, you really work quickly, Cathy replied. She popped a big bite of salad into her mouth as if she didn't care about her own words. Knock it off, Rebecca said firmly, looking straight at her sister. I felt relieved it wasn't a weak relationship. In fact, it made me feel good. I didn't like the idea of a defenseless Rebecca. I smiled and chose to ease the tension before we both started saying things we might regret later. Cathy is just concerned about you, I said kindly. I understand why. I defended Rebecca's sister for being curious about us. Everything was happening too fast. I took a bite of my roast to buy myself a moment to think. I was letting things get tangled up too easily. That is a lovely aquarium, Cathy said, trying to shift the topic. I think she saw that she had gone a bit too far, so she chose to be more friendly. It was nice to see her wanting to make peace. We spent the rest of the dinner talking about how to take care of saltwater fish. Cathy liked watching Mufasa move around. It's funny how your view of someone can change when they show interest in what you love. When we finished eating, Rebecca started to clean the dishes. I told her to sit down. She made the meal, so I would do the washing up. The thought of her cleaning again bothered me a bit. It felt better to keep things fair and hold on to some of our freedom. Cathy surprised me when she took a towel and insisted on drying. Rebecca looked happy. You're rushing things, Cathy said softly when Rebecca went to the bathroom. I understood she wasn't talking about the dishes. Shouldn't you talk to Rebecca about this? I asked, handing her a clean bowl. She took it and started to dry. I already tried, Cathy replied. She's feeling weak. The fire and the accidents have hurt her confidence. I'd feel better if she came back with me tonight. At least she was being honest. I thought for a moment while I washed a plate. Everything was happening so fast. The comfort I felt was also a bit scary. I shook my head. We work well together, I said, giving her the clean plate. I scolded myself for being scared of feeling safe. After you finish with her, she'll end up crying at my door, Cathy said meanly. I thought about how long it would take to make someone suffer in a kitchen sink. I paused my washing and took a deep breath. I'm going to overlook that, I replied stiffly. I went back to washing the plate I had been cleaning. No, I had to think again. You need to trust Rebecca. If I really meant what you think, you wouldn't be here, I said. Cathy stepped back when I handed her the clean plate. She took it carefully. Maybe I looked a bit intense. I'm sorry, Cathy said firmly, then dropped the towel on the counter and set the wet dish next to it. I wasn't sure what she was sorry for. Just then, Rebecca walked back into the kitchen, interrupting our talk. Let's go for a walk, Cathy suggested, putting on a smile for Rebecca that didn't seem genuine. Rebecca looked at me and I nodded my head to show it was okay. The two of them left the house, and I let out a sigh of relief, because I wasn't fond of Cathy. After finishing the dishes, I sat down on the couch and waited for the women to come back. I was not happy with how the evening was going. I thought I would get some tough questions, but I didn't expect such harsh judgment. I poured myself a glass of wine and played some music. I closed my eyes and relaxed, trying to let go of the stress. The first thing I noticed was a soft touch on my lips. Gentle and warm, they stirred me from my short nap. I opened my eyes to see Rebecca's smiling face as she sat on me, her knees beside my legs. "Where's your sister?" I asked, my memory returning. "I sent her home," Rebecca said, her tone changing. "She thought you would use me and then not care about me anymore." Her expression turned worried. "You're not going to do that, right?" "I would never do that to you," I replied. Rebecca leaned in and kissed me again, her lips soft against mine. I wrapped my arms around her, holding her a little tighter. She brushed her lips against my cheek, and then paused near my ear. "I really hope you want to be close to me," Rebecca whispered softly. My heart raced at her words. I needed to set things straight before I lost my courage. "I didn't come here just for that," I replied. It sounded odd saying it, but I knew I had to make it clear. I felt a smile on my face. "And I'm not doing this because you helped me out," Rebecca whispered. "I just want to be close to you, Damon." I had never heard anything like that from a woman before. It was clear that she wanted me, and I felt the same way. I leaned in and kissed her, pulling her shirt out of her pants. She laughed and helped me take her shirt off. Then I moved on to her top. I struggled with the latch in the back while she looked into my eyes, smiling. The latch opened, and I gently pulled her top down her arms. Rebecca didn't seem shy as I looked at her. She looked even better than I had imagined. I set the top aside and held her in my hands. Her eyes sparkled as I softly touched her. She reacted to my gentle touches, becoming more aware of my presence. I leaned closer, feeling a strong pull of affection, and gently kissed her. She sighed softly, and I could sense a rush of warmth in her. I then turned my attention to the other side, savoring the moment as my heart started to race. I realized it had been quite a while since I felt this way. I gently rubbed her neck while smiling at what she found funny. "What's so funny?" I asked. "My sister," Rebecca replied as she sat up. She kissed me warmly. "She said we wouldn't get along, that it would be dull." "It definitely wasn't dull," I said, feeling a rush of excitement. I chuckled, my heart racing. She held my face in her hands and kissed me again. She pressed her forehead to mine and looked deeply into my eyes. "I don't think your sister likes me," I joked, trying to lighten the mood. Rebecca smiled and playfully swayed her hips. "Just forget about her. I am. She just wants me to come back home with her." The idea of Rebecca possibly leaving hit me harder than I thought it would. I knew I had no say in it, but right then I felt so happy, and I wanted this moment to last. "I don't want you to go," I admitted. It felt more like a desperate call than the request I meant. "So, you enjoy being with me?" Rebecca asked with a smile. "I believe you used me," I chuckled. My thoughts wandered to the feelings I wanted to share if she chose to stick around. I could feel her closeness as she remained comfortably beside me on the couch. "One day at a time," Rebecca said, then kissed me again. Her kiss was bold, now aware of what I wanted. I gently turned her to the left and laid her on the couch, shifting so I was on top. We had made quite a mess together. It was clear the couch would need some cleaning later. I slowly pulled back for a moment, then gently moved closer to Rebecca again, feeling the warmth between us. She wrapped her legs around me, pulling me in even more. Our mouths moved together while our bodies swayed like gentle waves. Every movement she made seemed to understand what I wanted, and we moved in sync. As the moment settled, the excitement from before changed into a deeper feeling. I felt closer to her now that our earlier desire had passed. It was a wonderful feeling of comfort and connection. We remained together for a long time, both in body and in thought. Rebecca encouraged me with her touch, and I followed her lead. I felt myself getting close again, and she noticed it. Her hands grabbed me gently, pulling me in closer. I found my release once more, feeling a strong connection between us. She was shaking a little, but it was softer than before. She smiled at me when I felt better, her legs resting comfortably on the couch. "You enjoy being close to me," Rebecca said, her eyes full of light. "Yes," I confessed, "a lot." Rebecca pulled me into a warm hug, as if she wanted to keep me close forever. I felt calm in her arms and let go of my worries. I chose to forget the waiting and rules I had set for myself. I realized I liked her more than I expected. I really didn't want her to go. I had been close to a woman with the lights on. Twice. I had done that only once with Linda. With Rebecca, it felt easy. Rebecca was comfortable with herself. Her body was just part of life. She had no worries about being open with me. I stood up slowly, moving away gently. "Come," I said softly. "I want to clean you up." I held out my hand, and she took it in hers. I looked past the clear need for a new couch as she stood there. It was a small cost to fix. I took her hand and guided her to the clean shower. "My chest isn't that dirty," Rebecca joked as I washed it for the third time. There was something about the soapy water, how smooth and soft it made everything, that caught my attention. I thought of them as things to help feed babies, but I also like to think of them as my special toys. "They are really messy," I teased, putting my hands around her again. I felt a little bit excited, but it wasn't too strong. I was happy just to have her close to me as the warm water touched our skin. I really didn't want her to go away. "I want you to stay here with me," I said strongly, holding her close as the warm water flowed around us. I was holding her from behind, almost swaying in the rain. "Ask me tomorrow," Rebecca said with a smile, "when I'm dressed." I laughed at her practicality. "I'll still ask," I replied with a grin. "But for you, I'll happily ask again tomorrow and the day after if I have to." I already knew I wanted her to stay no matter what. I felt her shift against me, and I knew that if she kept doing that, it would wake up again, just doing its job after all. Rebecca tilted her head back, and I kissed her gently. A wave of warmth filled me, something comforting and really nice. It felt deeper than just a simple moment. I pulled back from the kiss and turned her in my arms, seeing the same feelings reflected in her eyes. "It's happening too quickly," Rebecca said, a bit shaky. She didn't sound scared, but she was as confused as I was. I held her close, keeping her warm against me in the soft rain. Everything felt like it was moving too fast, yet it was also really strong. It was everything I wanted. I had planned to help Rebecca feel good again when I took her to bed. But the kiss in the shower changed my mind. It felt too intense to continue with what we had started while we were still a bit unsure. I held her close, just as she had held me the night before. It was a flood I could not stop. I cut some of the leftover roast into small pieces. I woke up before Rebecca and wanted to make her breakfast. Making omelets was the only cooking skill I had. I didn't know if a steak and egg omelet would make her happy, but it sure sounded good to me. I had the pan heating on the stove, set to 3. Cooking omelets was all about the right heat. If you got it right, you would have nicely cooked yellow eggs wrapping around the filling. If you made a mistake, the eggs would turn brown or be too watery, and they wouldn't look very good. "Good morning," Rebecca said with a smile. She had quietly come up to me. I glanced up to see her in one of my t-shirts. Her hair was messy and sticking out in different directions. My heart skipped a beat seeing her like this. No sunrise could ever look as bright as her. I set the knife down on the cutting board. "I want you to stay here with me," I said again, reminding her of what I had asked last night. Rebecca was dressed in a simple way, but I didn't want to forget this moment. "Okay," she said with a smile, and I felt more relaxed. "Good morning," I said, gesturing to a stool. "Do you want some coffee?" "Yes, please," Rebecca replied as she took a seat. "I'm making steak and cheese omelets," I said while I reached for the coffee pot. "That sounds great," she smiled. "I really care about you," I said without thinking as I poured her a cup of coffee. The quiet scared me for a moment, and I turned to see her just a short distance away. Her smile spoke to me. No words were needed. Everything felt clear. After lunch, Rebecca and her sister had a tense phone call. I decided to leave Rebecca to her argument with Cathy because I didn't want to get in the middle of their sisterly fight. I already knew who would win. Instead, I went back to fixing the wall. I spread a layer of mud over the tape on the drywall. I felt proud of what I had done. I walked into the garage and tried to do the same thing on the other side of the wall. I had to move some insulation to keep things warm. Other than that, it turned out just as good as the inside. "Looks great," Rebecca said as I finished smoothing the walls in the garage. She was still wearing the t-shirt she put on this morning. "Is Cathy still mad?" I asked, already guessing the answer. I was surprised at how firm her sister had been about this. It felt strange for a sister to go that far. "She'll be fine. She tried to use the mother card, but it didn't work, so now she's upset." "The mother card?" "You know, the old line about how sad my mom would be if she were here now. That kind of talk." Rebecca said this casually. "Was your mom like that?" "I'm not sure," Rebecca said quietly. "She passed away when I was born." I could hear a bit of sadness in her voice. Cathy was trying her best to be like a mother to Rebecca, but she wasn't doing a great job. Still, I suddenly felt sorry for her. "Cathy took care of you?" I asked, setting my tools down and stepping closer. I realized I didn't know much about Rebecca's life. "Yes," Rebecca said, wrapping her arms around me gently. "Cathy was in her 20s when my mom passed away. I think I was a surprise," she laughed softly, "and I kind of still am." There was a hint of sadness in her voice because she never got to know her mom. I often thought about how things might have been different if she hadn't passed away. "Then you wouldn't have bumped into me," I replied, smiling. Rebecca's hands playfully touched my back, and she gave it a gentle squeeze. "I do like your back," Rebecca joked. She was feeling playful. I felt a strong wish to see her laugh. I quickly closed the container of drywall mud and took Rebecca's hand. She followed me happily, her smile showing she felt the same way I did. She lay back down next to me, her hand resting gently by my side. "I have worries," Rebecca said. There was truth in her eyes. "I'm afraid I might hurt you one day. I don't know how I could bear it if you hated me." It made me sad that she still thought she was unlucky. I wished I could take that feeling away from her. "I could never hate you," I replied gently. For a moment I thought of Linda and if I felt anything like this when we first met. I didn't want it to be untrue. "It won't be on purpose," Rebecca said softly. "I want you to know I would never hurt you on purpose." I wanted her to stop talking. She seemed to give up before the fight even began. I leaned in and kissed her, trying to fill her mind with warmth. "No matter what happens," I whispered in her ear, "I forgive you." I felt her smile against my cheek. Her hand gently touched me and her lips brushed my neck. I took a deep breath, surprised that the feeling between us was still so strong. "You silly man, Damon Richardson," Rebecca said softly. "My dear, sweet fool." The warmth spread quickly inside me as her breath brushed by my ear, and her gentle touch sent a wave of love through me. "I love you," she whispered. In that moment, I felt so happy. It was a beautiful chaos inside me. My phone rang while we were eating. I had planned to take Rebecca out for dinner, but she liked to make meals at home instead. She found some fresh halibut at the store and made a delicious peach and pepper salsa to go with it. I thought it sounded really strange. I tried it because I wanted to support her. It was amazing. Rebecca really knows how to make food taste great. I checked my phone and saw Bitch Barrow on the screen. I answered quickly, wishing I had changed Linda's contact name back. "You didn't call me back," Linda said right away, without even saying hello. "Nope," I replied. I knew that my short answer would annoy her. I wasn't sure why it made me feel good. I had told myself that I wouldn't hold any more anger toward her. "Are you with someone?" Linda asked, still curious. I smiled at my beautiful chef. "Yeah," I answered, feeling a bit rude. Rebecca smiled back at me. "Is it the same person who hurt me before?" Linda inquired, her tone softer now. "Yes," I replied, quickly adding, "It was just a joke. I'm sorry." "Are you happy?" Linda wanted to know. Her voice sounded sincere and different from how she usually spoke. "What's the matter, Linda?" I asked in reply. "You can't spend years with someone and not notice when something is wrong." Rebecca's eyes grew big when I said Linda's name. "I feel terrible," Linda said. "I had a lot of anger and now, well, I wish I hadn't felt that way." I thought about what parts she didn't wish away. "I want to make sure you aren't stuck in it either." She would never just ask. It just wasn't how she did things. "I forgive you, Linda," I said, "and I hope you can forgive me too." I noticed Rebecca making a sad puppy face that almost made me laugh, but it wasn't the right moment. "I do. I have," Linda replied with excitement. "And what about Damon?" "Yes," I answered. "Tell her she's a lucky girl," Linda said happily before hanging up. After 4 years of anger, Linda had found her kindness again. She wanted to make sure I didn't hold any anger towards her. It felt nice to let her off the hook. It was nice that there wasn't any anger or hate connected to me out in the world. At least we could share that good feeling. "Does Linda want you back?" Rebecca asked with a smile. "That chance is long gone. That was over 4 years ago. She just wanted to check that I didn't hate her." "I think she felt bad about things," I replied. "You don't have feelings for her anymore?" Rebecca asked, watching me closely. I looked through my recent calls on my phone and showed her the list. She put her hand over her mouth and giggled. "I guess bitch barrow came in handy sometimes." "Don't be jealous. I'm changing it back to Linda just to make things nicer," Rebecca said with a laugh and a nod. I began to fix it. I never liked that little digital keyboard. It turned easy tasks, like changing a name, into a hassle. "If you can manage being around my sister," Rebecca said, "I won't hold Linda against you." "Maybe we should try to get along with Cathy, too," I suggested. I finished changing my name and set my phone down. "She'll need a bit more time," Rebecca insisted. "She believes Tammy thinks you're not good for me." "Did Tammy call you?" "While you were in the bathroom," Rebecca answered. "They both think I'm just a plaything." I smiled and bit my lip. I almost said they were right, but I worried Rebecca might misunderstand me. Male humor didn't always work well with women. "She mentioned she's close to your mom," I said to Rebecca, trying to learn more about her life. I didn't want to ask too many questions directly. Rebecca didn't seem completely at ease with her past. I really didn't want my curiosity to spoil our time together. "Yeah, that's what I heard," Rebecca replied. "She always shows up when Cathy and I could use some help." Cathy won't say it, but I believe Tammy helped us with money for a long time. "What about your dad?" I asked, and then felt bad for being so bold. My curiosity got ahead of my kindness. Luckily, Rebecca didn't look upset. "I don't think my mom knew. I believe she had her own ways." Rebecca didn't seem ashamed of it. "I had some pictures before the fire. Besides that, I don't know much about my past. No grandparents, aunts, or uncles, just Cathy. Let's give her some time and then ask her to join us for dinner. It'll be a safe place," I planned. Rebecca smiled and reached her hand across the counter. I took her hand. "I'm really happy I bumped into you," Rebecca said with a laugh. The 4-day weekend flew by. We managed to smooth and paint the patched wall. It was hard to see that there had ever been a hole there. Rebecca also removed the stains from the couch cushions. She also changed around the whole kitchen. I realized that I had made a mistake when I picked the silverware drawer. To me, it didn't really matter, but it made her happy to move it. That made me happy, too. Work felt different that morning. I think it matched my new way of looking at things. I knew what was waiting for me when I got home. I was in a meeting that I had said I would go to, and Susan was there like she said she would be. We were looking over a website that our team had built. The people using it were not happy with how slow it was, so everyone from hardware, networking, and programming came together to talk about it. We were halfway through Bob's hardware update when our receptionist, Mary, walked in with a bunch of roses in a heart-shaped vase. I thought it was someone's birthday or anniversary. Mary walked past the women and came right to me. "What's this?" I asked. "They're for you," Mary said with a big smile. It was a funny smile. I looked at the flowers, then back at Mary's bright red face. "You brought them in here? Why not just leave them on my desk?" Mary shook her head, her smile getting bigger. She pointed to the note card sticking out from the flowers. I took it off its plastic clip. To, "My special friend." From, "Your special friend, I love you." "Broken garage door, really?" Mary laughed. Susan, who had been reading over my shoulder, tried to hold back her laughter but couldn't. I quickly stuffed the note in my pocket. I felt my face get warm. "Who is she?" Susan asked. I didn't answer. I need to put these in water," I said, standing up. "Can we take a 5-minute break?" "You have to tell us who she is." Susan laughed as I quickly left the room. Mary came after me to my desk. "Do you like her?" Mary asked. I had never talked much with Mary before, just about the weather. Now she was acting like a close friend. I turned around, feeling more shy than I should. "Yes," I said with a sigh. "A lot." I gave in to what was clear. "She's marking her territory." Mary laughed. She gave me a card. "This is a florist that delivers on the same day. Send her 2 dozen flowers." I was sure I looked puzzled. "She's making it clear that she wants to be recognized. There are rules, you know. Send back twice as much. Mary turned and nearly bumped into Susan. A gift? Susan asked softly with a smile I didn't earn. Mary shared a quiet laugh with Susan. That's quite a strong no trespassing sign, Susan said as she leaned over to smell one of the roses. What's she like? Both of them were looking at me closely. Suddenly it felt like everyone was curious about my personal life. The toy is just a private joke, I replied softly. Chatting over the cubicles wasn't exactly a private moment. So you haven't been with her? Mary asked. I could feel my face getting hot as I thought about Rebecca. They both burst into laughter again. Flowers. She needed to send me flowers. It's not what you think, I said, a bit louder than I meant to. I love her. My words came out before I thought. Neither Mary nor Susan looked surprised. They just kept smiling. She's a lucky girl, Susan said. 24, Mary added. They both walked away laughing. I sat down feeling defeated, grabbed my phone, and ordered 24 roses. Lunch felt odd. I usually went to a sandwich shop and brought my food back to my desk. Sometimes I would switch things up and have a burger for lunch. This time, as I was walking back to my desk, Susan stopped me. She wanted me to come into the break room with her. I didn't really want to, but I felt like I couldn't say no. When I got there, I saw Mary and a compliance officer named Trudy sitting down, as if they were waiting for me. I had talked to Trudy before when I was working on some questions to find strange patterns in our data. It looked like I was about to face some friendly but curious questions. I let out a deep breath as I took a seat. What's her name and how did you meet her? Mary asked. Everyone was looking at me, waiting for my answer. I carefully opened my sandwich, hoping to buy some time. Finally, I decided to share. The story felt silly as I spoke it out loud. They all listened closely as I explained what happened. They asked me to clear up a few points, and then I continued with my tale. I stopped at the part where the flowers arrived. She crashed into your car, tried to get money from you, ruined your favorite jeans, you helped her out of jail, and she broke your phone and your garage door. Her family can't stand you, and you care about her? Susan asked in disbelief as she summed it all up. Yes, I replied, smiling at how silly it all seemed. Totally. It's sweet, Trudy said. It's crazy, Mary disagreed. You've only known her for 5 days. She has no home and no job. I nodded. The truth was clear. Are you sure you're not moving on too quickly after your divorce? Susan asked. I glanced at all three of them. Trudy was smiling while the others seemed worried. I liked the way Trudy smiled. My marriage ended over 4 years ago, I replied, focusing on Trudy. I'm not sure why I felt a bond with Rebecca, but I really do. I couldn't stop now even if I tried. Look, it's lovely, Trudy said, glancing at Mary and Susan. She's made some changes in the kitchen. Yep, she's in it for the long run, Mary replied. I was starting to feel a bit confused. Susan noticed. It's her kitchen now, Susan said with a grin. The flowers, the kitchen, it all shows how she feels. I clearly didn't understand what they were talking about. If you notice your sock drawer is changed, you better think about proposing, Susan joked. It didn't bother me. I thought it was fine for Rebecca to show that she cared. I felt like I had already made my feelings clear. A smile came to my face at that idea. Look, Trudy said, giving me a nod. You haven't scared him away. In fact, they made me feel even more confident. I took a bite of my lonely chicken salad sandwich. All 3 women were watching me closely as I chewed. I swallowed hard, not fully finished with my bite. When everyone is looking at you, it makes eating harder. Why do you care so much? I asked. I never felt like I deserved anything more than a simple greeting before the flowers came. The women exchanged glances and smiled at each other. Looks like she's having more fun than we are, Mary joked. My face turned red and I took another bite of my sandwich, trying to look somewhere else. They seemed to enjoy teasing me. Do we really have to talk about that? I asked, feeling uncomfortable. All 3 of them smiled and nodded. I figured I was the highlight of the day at the insurance office. I love my flowers, Rebecca said as she wrapped me in a warm hug when I walked in. I noticed a nice smell coming from her kitchen. I reminded myself to check my sock drawer later. Then she gave me a kiss that felt like I had been away for a long time. My flowers were great too, I replied, happy to hold Rebecca close. I liked the thought of coming home to her. Here, this is for you, Rebecca said, giving me a check. It was from Tammy for $3,000. What is this for? I asked as I looked at the check again. For my bail, Rebecca replied with a smile. Tammy came by for lunch and insisted on giving me this. You weren't here to say no, so I took it. But I'll get the money back when you go to court, I said. I had decided not to worry about the service fee, and I didn't want to make Rebecca feel bad by bringing it up. She likes to help me out, Rebecca said. She's wealthy, so it's fine. I wasn't sure I would take the check. I'm not comfortable with gifts that big or feeling like I owe someone. But Rebecca seemed okay with it. Does she often do things like this? I asked, smiling so Rebecca wouldn't worry. All my life, Rebecca replied as she guided me to the kitchen. She likes your fish, just so you know. I turned to see Mufasa resting quietly at the bottom of the tank. Tammy and Cathy were an odd but helpful team for Rebecca. I wished I could be more steady, or at least more predictable. Dinner will be ready soon, she said cheerfully. It smells great, I replied, placing the bill on the counter. I'm trying something new, Rebecca said, and you get to taste it first. They're pork chops filled with pesto. She took 2 hot chops out of the oven. It seemed gross, but it didn't smell bad at all. I knew I would eat it, even if it tasted terrible. I got my taste buds ready and went to find a strong drink just in case. Why didn't you ask Tammy to join us for dinner? I asked while looking in the wrong drawer for a corkscrew. Rebecca pointed to the drawer next to it. It was funny how we didn't need to say much. Sure enough, the corkscrew was right where she said it would be. I did, Rebecca replied as she moved the meat onto plates. She said she was busy. Rebecca gave me a teasing smile. I think she was seeing someone special. I couldn't help but smile back. Seeing someone special? I thought she was married. The person she's seeing is, Rebecca laughed. She served some green beans and mashed potatoes onto the plates. The potatoes looked like they had cheese mixed in. I never imagined her like that, I said honestly. I was remembering my brief meeting with Tammy. She seemed too proper to be involved with a married man. Perhaps it was just the fancy style of her apartment that made me feel this way. She has been his girlfriend for a long time, Rebecca went on. I believe that's how she gets her money. She certainly doesn't have a job. Rebecca set a plate in front of me and I handed her a full glass of wine in return. I glanced at my pork chop and the strange-looking green mush oozing out of it. I won't even say what it made me think of. I was starting to doubt my ability to pretend to enjoy this meal. I thought about whether Rebecca would be upset if I added A1 sauce to my food. Rebecca sliced her chop with confidence, dipped a piece of meat in the pesto, and took a big bite. I waited, curious to see if she would find it hard to swallow. This is way better than it seems, she said as she reached for another piece. I wasn't sure if she was just saying that to tease me. I nervously picked up my fork but then decided not to try it. Instead, I went for the potatoes and happily savored their cheesy goodness. The green beans had some crunchy, tasty bits mixed in. It was delicious. At least I was getting enough to eat. Rebecca smiled at me. You're scared of it, she said kindly. I understood what she was saying. What? I pretended not to know. I didn't like feeling scared at that moment. Rebecca just tilted her head and smiled more. Finally, I gave in. It's just how it looks, I said gently. I'm getting there. She stood up and came closer to me, still smiling, but there was a playful look in her eyes. I'll get to it, I said, trying to explain myself. I really didn't enjoy her feeding me like I was a little kid. She took some of the pesto with her finger and tasted it. I had to admit it looked tasty. Then she kissed me softly. In that moment, I really started to like pesto. The pork was just right for the pesto to stand out. It was too bad that Rebecca only cooked 2, but she let me have half of hers. I asked her to make it again. I'm going to turn into a big guinea pig at this rate, I joked as we started cleaning the dishes. I'm planning your exercise routine, Rebecca said, looking very serious. I glanced at her while I passed her a plate to dry. There was no hint of a smile on her face. I'm not really into working out, I replied. I thought it was time to share what I was feeling. I would go for walks or bike rides, but I didn't want to follow a strict plan. I only had one life to live, and I didn't want to spend it exercising in a gym. What a pity, Rebecca said with a grin. I was liking our workout sessions. She had that smile on her face. It was a few hours later when we got back to finish the dishes. I had worked my heart a bit harder. The next day, Carl joined me for lunch. We met at a casual restaurant close to his office. I usually didn't drink when I was at work, but with Carl, I made an exception. I always found it funny to see him in a suit. It didn't really fit his laid-back style, and that made it even more amusing. When I reached the grill, I saw he was already on his second beer. "Damon!" Carl shouted as I got closer. "I'm happy you chose to wear pants today." Man, he really didn't know how to keep his voice down. Half the restaurant was glancing at me, smiling. "Carl," I said softly, "I forgot to say thank you for driving me home that night. I'll ask someone else next time." Carl chuckled, and I felt a little less embarrassed. We ordered sandwiches and a couple of drinks. "So she's staying with you?" "Yep, we got along well." "You mean she likes you?" Carl said, shaking his head and smiling. "So much for being a single guy." "You made it, what, 24 hours? "It felt like a really long day," I replied. Our beers came, and Carl raised his glass. He made a toast to my silly choices and then to a girl named Rebecca. That's what I liked about Carl. He laughed at my mistakes but never looked down on me. He was just there to support me. "Her family is a bit odd," I said as we settled in. "She has a sister who doesn't seem to like me much and a very wealthy friend who acts like she cares too much." I handed Carl the bill. "That's from her friend to help pay the bail money." "Are you going to take it?" "I would. I've always wanted a wealthy friend." "Rebecca says I would hurt Tammy's feelings if I don't. I guess I'll stop at the bank when I head back to work. But I'm not too comfortable with it." $3,000 is a lot of money. Don't hurt her feelings. You should introduce us." "That might be rude," I said with a laugh. Carl chuckled and then gulped down half of his beer. "Do you really love her?" Carl asked, putting his mug on the table. "Yes, but I can't explain why. Everything tells me to leave, but I feel stuck here on purpose." "Being close to someone can make you feel that way," Carl said as I took a sip. I nearly sprayed beer through my nose, trying to hold back my laughter. I knew he waited until I had a sip of beer before he said anything. "Good cooking and love," I added, after I wiped the beer from my chin. "A great cook with a wealthy friend," Carl said with a grin. "I think you've struck gold." "It's not just about love," I replied. "I want her close. I don't want her anywhere but here with me." "Go for it," Carl encouraged. "You deserve to be happy, and I want more friends who are happy." I really wished I didn't have to return to work that afternoon. If I could, I would relax with Carl over some beers. "I owe you, you know. Without you, I wouldn't have made it through the divorce," I said. "Any time, my friend," Carl replied, waving to the waitress for another round. "I got a job," Rebecca said happily as I came in. I felt her excitement and gave her a congratulatory kiss, then another. She was wearing my Stay Puft Marshmallow Man t-shirt and not much else, at least from what I could tell. "Where are you working?" I asked. "At a restaurant," Rebecca replied. "It's on the bus route and not too far from here." She held up my Ghostbusters boxers. "Put these on! I have something fun planned for tonight." Her smile was full of excitement. "Just wear the boxers," she added as I walked to the bedroom. I liked the way things were going. Rebecca had the crock pot set up on the coffee table. Next to the TV was a plate with a piece of sharp cheese and some crackers. There were 2 cans of beer and a few empty plates nearby. "I found your Ghostbusters DVDs, so I thought we could have a little picnic in front of the TV," she said with a big smile. "I liked the way this night was going." "I thought you said the movie wasn't that great," I asked. "It's all about who you watch it with," Rebecca replied. She took off the lid of the crock pot, and I saw the strangest little treats inside. They looked like tiny pigs in blankets warming up. Rebecca picked one up with her fingers and held it to my mouth. The little sausage was covered in a much darker crust than I was used to. They looked a bit overdone. Rebecca smiled and gently pushed it closer until my lips opened and I took a bite. It was so good. The sausages were wrapped in pretzel bread. Suddenly the crock pot looked too small for all the delicious snacks inside. "These are really good," I said with my mouth full of pretzel and hot dog. I loved how it made Rebecca smile. I needed to learn to trust her cooking. She broke all the rules I had for food, but she always made it taste amazing. "Let's have finger food tonight," Rebecca said as she turned on the TV. Somehow, she had figured out all the different remote controls and got the music and movie player going. "That sounds great," I said, smiling as I settled down on the couch. I had to push some folded towels aside. I gave Rebecca a confused look. "I don't want to mess up the couch," Rebecca said with a playful tone. I suspected there was nothing under her t-shirt. "That's just right," I said with a smile. We cuddled on the couch and watched the movie, sharing snacks, laughing, and sometimes losing track of the show. Rebecca enjoyed teasing me by being silly and playful. I enjoyed the playful moments we shared. We were watching a scene where the character with the pencil-thin neck was turning off the safety grid. Rebecca, on the other hand, seemed indifferent. She smiled at how focused I was on the screen, then rested her head in my lap. I felt a rush of warmth and excitement that made me forget about the troubles happening in New York City. I was still smiling from our movie night together. It had been a few days since then, but the happy feelings kept me going at work. I felt it was important to come up with something special. During work, I spent some time browsing online and found a fancy cooking fair in Indianapolis happening this weekend. Rebecca was not starting her new job until Monday, so I booked a hotel room and bought some tickets. I was nervous about my surprise when I drove into the garage. For the first time since Rebecca moved in, the air felt empty. There was no smell of food. She wasn't there to greet me at the door. The house was quiet, except for the soft blue light from the fish tank. I called out, but no one answered. She hadn't said she would be gone, though we weren't married. Still, something felt off. I turned on the light and walked to the bedroom, thinking I might find her sleeping. Suddenly, I heard a noise from the side. Before I knew it, a sharp pain hit the left side of my face, and everything went dark. My knees felt weak, and I almost fell to the ground. A big figure stepped into the room from the hallway, and my stomach twisted tightly. I fell to my hands and knees before I knew what was happening. I could taste blood as I struggled to get air. A foot hit my stomach, flipping me over and making me feel sick. 3 men stood in front of me. I didn't know any of them. One person was smiling, another one had just spat on me, and the third had a knife pressed against Rebecca's throat. "I have money," I said through gritted teeth, trying not to cough up blood. "Just don't hurt her." The smiling guy stepped on my wrist, pushing down hard. Luckily, the carpet was keeping my bones from breaking. "Listen, buddy," the man who had spat on me said, "Mr. Gordini doesn't like you being with his girl." Then he kicked me in the side. I felt my ribs hurt, and all I could do was grunt in pain. "Maybe we should hang out with your friends," the man said. I heard Rebecca shout with excitement in the distance. I felt a wave of anger. I stopped trying to free my wrist and pushed against his leg instead. To my surprise, I managed to get my hand free without hurting it. I stood up a little and knocked into the man's knee, making him fall down. I kicked him in the stomach, and some blood fell on his clothes. I started to get up. It was my home, and they were threatening everything I cared about. Then, a knee hit my chin and sent my head back. Then a punch hit me hard, and I lost my balance. I fell back to the floor, my head spinning like it was stuck in thick mud. I wanted to get up, but my left eye was puffy, and I could feel blood dripping from my mouth. 2 people lifted me to my feet. I wanted to fight back, but my body felt weak. I could hear Rebecca's voice crying out far away. Suddenly, I started moving faster, my right eye seeing nothing but a blue fish tank. My head tilted to the side, and water spilled out from the top. I fell down, feeling a warm wetness drip into my ear. "Why didn't it break?" one of the men said, sounding frustrated. I tried to lift my head, but my neck wouldn't listen. "No!" Rebecca shouted. I heard glass break, and suddenly, a wave of salty water washed over me. I looked up and saw the man with a kitchen stool in his hands, smiling. He was laughing. "Stay away from Miss Simpson, or you and your family will be in big trouble," the man with a smile warned. He threw a stool over the counter, and I heard it crash in the kitchen. The name Miss Simpson sounded familiar, but my mind was too cloudy to remember why. I wanted to ask, "Who is Miss Simpson?" But all that came out was blood. I started to choke, so I rolled onto my side to clear my throat. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Rebecca being held by another man. I reached out for her, but I was too weak. My arm fell down beside a flopping Mufasa. A sharp pain shot through my arm. What a way to go, I thought. Killed by my own fish. A burning sensation filled my arm. Everything went dark. I could hear my name in the distance, but it felt blurry. When I tried to open my eyes, they wouldn't budge. My hands wouldn't move when I tried to wipe my eyes. I focused hard, trying to wake up my mind. She feels guilty. They say he will get better. She's going away. These were just pieces of what I heard. I almost knew the voices. It was like trying to tune a radio that wouldn't quite catch the right channel. My thoughts wandered. It's for the best. I'll take care of him. I couldn't tell how time was passing as I sank back into the darkness, too tired to resist. "Good morning, Mr. Richardson." The voice sounded happy. I heard the sound of curtain rings moving on the rail and my eyelids opened wide. I blinked slowly as the light made my eyes hurt. "The doctor will be here soon. She hopes you will be awake," said a voice that got closer. I saw a figure in olive green, straight and neat, not what I imagined for a kind voice. I coughed as I tried to talk. My throat cleared away what felt like days of being blocked. My mouth was dry, but my eyes were starting to adjust. I looked up to see a friendly smile. Her blonde hair was neatly tied back. Her eyes seemed sharp and didn't show any of my confusion. "Good morning," I managed to say, but my voice was rough. I coughed again. "I'm Julie. I work the morning shift," she said clearly, as if she thought I might be a bit slow. "Do you know where you are?" I glanced around the room. It was a hospital room. There were a few blinking machines, and the sheets were plain white against the beige walls. A big window with the curtains open was letting in way too much sunlight. My head started to hurt really badly. "Hospital," I said, trying to sound clear. I waved my hand toward the curtains. "Can we close those curtains?" The light felt like it was digging into my head. "If you promise to stay awake," Julie replied, moving to close the curtains before I could answer. "How long have I been here?" I asked. 4 days, Julie said with a smile. "This will be your 4th day." "What about Rebecca?" I asked, looking around the room. The room was quiet. The last thing I remembered was a knife at my throat. I tried to sit up, but my chest hurt and my head felt dizzy. "Is Rebecca okay?" I asked. "I don't know who that is," Julie replied. "You came in by yourself." She gently pushed me back down onto the pillow. "You need to stay here, but we do have a phone." I felt a wave of guilt wash over me. I couldn't stop thinking about Rebecca and what those men might be doing to her. Scary images raced through my mind. I really didn't like those thoughts. "Call the police, please," I begged. I tried to get up again, but Julie was too strong, and a sharp pain in my chest made it hard to move. "The police will be back this morning," Julie replied, pushing down on my shoulders even harder. 4 days. Oh no, she could be dead. I felt useless. I just let them take her. I lifted my hands, but the pain in my chest felt like a knife. I brushed Julie's arms off my shoulders and sat up with a groan. "Please, Mr. Richardson." Julie seemed nervous and took a step back. "You need to stay still." My feet got tangled in the sheets as I tried to swing them off the bed. It hurt more as I leaned down to move the sheet. Everything ached as I shifted my legs to the side. Julie stretched out her arms, trying to stop me. I stood up, and everything started to spin in big circles. I felt sick to my stomach, and I struggled to stay upright. Julie quickly caught me and guided me back down onto the bed. "Take it easy. You need to go slow," Julie said. I had to follow her advice. My mind and body felt like they were not working together. "I need to call the police right away," I insisted as Julie helped me lie down. The pillow was soft under my head, and the dizzying room started to calm down. I felt so weak, always weak. I couldn't help it. Tears filled my eyes, and it felt like my heart was breaking as I cried. They should have just ended it all. "I'll call them," Julie said with a heavy breath as I finally lay down on the bed. "I couldn't stop what happened," I whispered, feeling defeated. "Just breathe. Let the medicine wear off," she said. She took a cloth from beside the bed and started to clean my face. "Things will make more sense soon." I felt too weak to even sit up. "I need my phone," I said, glancing at the white nightstand, hoping to see it there. Julie opened the drawer and found my phone. She handed it to me. It was obviously not working anymore. "I need to charge my phone," I said, starting to think clearly. A woman came in, dressed in the same olive green outfit as the nurse, but she had a white coat on top. "You're awake," the woman said, looking pleased. "I'm happy to see that." "I'm awake but a bit worried, doctor. He tried to get out of bed," another voice added. "And how did that go for you?" the doctor asked. I didn't like the way she joked about it. She wore glasses with brass frames and looked at me over them, waiting for me to speak. I really need a charger, I said, waving my phone. I had never memorized any phone numbers, including Rebecca's. I needed my list of contacts. Julie, can you find a charger that works for his phone? The doctor asked. She turned back to me as Julie took my phone and stepped outside. There, that's the first problem fixed, the doctor added. Thank you, I called out towards the door, suddenly remembering to be polite. I don't think Julie could hear it. You might feel a bit confused for a day or two, the doctor said while looking at her tablet. I've removed your pain medicine. If the pain gets too strong, just let me know and we can talk about giving it back to you. The pain kept me up at night. I had to stay awake. The doctor smiled and looked up from her tablet. Sorry, I'm Dr. Betty White, she said. Hi, I'm Damon Richardson, I replied. You're my first case of lionfish poisoning, Dr. White added. Dr. White said, I needed to talk to a coworker in Florida to check on your treatment. I realized this would cost money. I pushed those thoughts away. Rebecca Morrison was with me when I got hurt. What happened to her? There was a woman here when you first arrived, Dr. White replied as she walked to the top of the bed. I didn't catch her name, but the front desk should have it. She cried a lot, but she was okay otherwise. If she's not family, they wouldn't allow her to stay, I thought. It had to be Rebecca. No one else would be crying for me. I felt a bit relieved. Dr. White took a small flashlight from her pocket and asked me to look at a spot on the ceiling. She moved the light back and forth in front of my eyes. You have a concussion and you've been affected by the terroir venom, the doctor said. I was worried you might have swelling in your brain, but we checked, and it's just a concussion. I don't think you will have any long-term problems. You might want to avoid fights for a few months. She smiled, thinking that her clear advice was funny. You have a broken rib and some bruises on your stomach. That will make moving around hurt for a bit. She lifted my arm and pointed to a big red mark where Mufasa poked me. I've been told that the bruise will go away soon. She looked at it closely as if I were a science experiment. Then she let my arm fall back down. We want to stay with you until we're sure you can move around well or have someone to help you at home. So, I won't be here forever? I raised my arms to stretch and felt a quick pain in my chest. No, but it's smart to take your time. If you feel anything unusual, you should see a doctor right away. We might have missed an injury inside. Julie came back with a charger. This belongs to one of the nurses, she said as she plugged it into the wall. He finishes work in 3 hours, so you'll have to wait until then. I felt a bit of my worry go away. I had my phone back. Thank you, I said sincerely. Julie smiled and plugged my phone in. There was no familiar beep to show it was charging. It would take a little while to begin charging. I'll order some food for you, Julie said, grinning at my appreciation. I'm sure you're hungry. My mind pushed through the ache in my stomach and decided I was really hungry. I'm sorry for how I acted earlier, I said. I felt bad about being rude. I didn't know how Julie could be so patient with me. Don't worry about it, Julie replied. Clearly happy, I said sorry. Drugs can do that. Detective Williams will be here in about 30 minutes. I nodded, feeling a tightness in my chest. Even small movements reminded me I was hurt. Julie picked up a button connected by a string and placed it on the table by the phone. Press this if you need to go to the bathroom. One of us will help you. Your dizziness should get better today, Dr. White said. By tomorrow it should be easier to handle, but it can sometimes last a few days. I'll come by to see you in the morning. Just try to rest as much as you can. Thanks, doctor, I replied. She left me alone with Julie, who gave me the TV remote. I couldn't remember the last time I watched TV during the day. Julie had just left, saying she would bring breakfast. I set the TV remote aside and picked up my phone. It seemed to be taking a long time to start. I got a bit impatient as I waited for it to turn on. When it finally worked, I looked through my recent calls and decided to call Rebecca. I thought I would hear her voice, but instead I reached her voicemail. I left a message trying to sound clear as I expressed my worries and love for her. I asked her to call me back. I tried 3 more times before the detective came, and my worry grew each time I didn't get an answer. What do you remember? Detective Williams asked after we quickly introduced ourselves. Did you talk to Rebecca Morrison? I asked, feeling anxious. Yes, she told us about the attack that night, Williams answered. She was the one who reported it. Is she okay? I continued to ask. She was upset, but she wasn't hurt. A wave of relief washed over me at the detective's words. I didn't know how tense my shoulders were until that moment. She believes it's all her fault, but she can't explain why. I feel like she thinks bad things just happened to her. I could feel the tension creeping back in. I wasn't there for her. She was carrying the blame all alone. Do you know where she is? I asked quickly. I'm trying to reach her. I'm sorry, but I don't know, Williams replied with a sad look. I could tell he understood how worried I was. I have a phone number and an address for her sister. He looked a bit worried, realizing he might have shared too much information. My thoughts raced. She probably wouldn't be at home when I arrived. Perhaps she just didn't want to be there by herself. I really hoped she would call me. She must be feeling scared. Can you tell me what happened? Williams asked, trying to focus on his work. I shared everything I knew, but sadly I didn't know much. My descriptions of the attackers got rid of about 80% of the world's people, leaving only about 1 billion to look through. When I said the name Gordini, I saw a spark of recognition in his eyes. He didn't stop me, though. Instead, he kept taking notes. I almost said the name Simpson when it suddenly clicked in my mind. That was the last name on the check I cashed from Tammy. I didn't care much about her, but I didn't want to hurt any chances until I had Rebecca back with me. Rebecca understood. It's no surprise she felt guilty. Maybe she had some reason to. I didn't mind. Life without her would feel dull. I kept the name to myself and didn't share it with the detective. That matches what Rebecca said, the detective noted. She probably didn't hear Gordini. He sounded surprised. I chose to ignore his tone. Have you heard of Tony Gordini? He asked. I don't know any Gordinis, I replied honestly. If I showed you some pictures, do you think you could recognize the people who attacked you? Williams asked. Maybe, I said. Who is Tony Gordini? He closed his notebook and let out a sigh. Truthfully, Williams said softly, it's someone you wouldn't want to know. You really don't want to date his girlfriend, he laughed softly, or his wife. I didn't find anything funny about it. I don't even know his girlfriend, I replied, feeling annoyed. They were at my house. I don't care who he is. The detective's smile faded. He took a card from his pocket and gave it to me. Here's my number, Williams said. Call me when you're done here, and we can look at the pictures together. He didn't seem very eager to keep working on the case. If we can take them to court, they could face a year for breaking into a home and hurting someone. A year didn't feel like enough. He put extra stress on the if. His whole tone was meant to make me feel hesitant. You're not giving me much hope, I said, my irritation showing clearly. They have really good lawyers, Williams replied. No way am I letting this go, I nearly shouted. All right, Williams said quietly. I guess you're determined. You have my card. Call me when you're ready. He turned to go, but then quickly looked back. Do yourself a favor. Check out Gordini before you visit. He hurried out after that. I called Carl. Are you really sure about this? Carl asked as he pushed the wheelchair down the hall that evening. He thought I should stay another night. He was surprised by everything that had happened. At first, he wanted to get some friends together to deal with the troublemakers, but when I brought up Gordini, he calmed down right away. I didn't need the internet to know about Gordini, the crime boss. He ruled the city's dark side. Tammy was probably someone special to him. I figured that out. Why he wanted to keep me away, I couldn't guess. Honestly, I didn't care much about Tammy, except she might know where Rebecca was. Rebecca wasn't answering my calls, and I was trying to reach her every hour. Just get me out of here, I said quickly. Carl made it clear that I looked really bad and asked me again to stay for another night. The hospital staff were not too pleased and suggested I ask Dr. White for permission. I stood my ground, and they had no choice but to listen to me. To stop the argument, I agreed to use a wheelchair. Dude, this girl isn't good for you, Carl said, shaking his head. I care about her. I hope you don't care about her too much, Carl joked. I laughed, even though it hurt. I got out of the wheelchair as soon as we reached the parking lot. I was walking a bit awkwardly, trying to use my legs without straining my back too much. Getting into the car hurt, but I could handle it. At least the dizziness was fading. Tammy will know where she is, I said while Carl started the car. He sighed and rolled his eyes. I'm not taking you to see the Godfather's girlfriend, Carl replied. I just shook my head. Nope, I'm going by myself. Tammy isn't picking up my calls. I'm not letting you go by yourself. Listen, I don't know what's happening, but bringing someone along feels pointless, I said as I watched Carl drive out of the parking spot. Neither of us can really stop those guys. I just hope I can talk to them if it comes to that. I really don't think you can take another beating. Who am I going to hang out with if they hurt you badly? If they really wanted to hurt me, I would already be gone. I don't think it will go that far. Come on, even the police officer tried to talk you out of it. I care about her, I replied again. That said a lot. All right, Carl agreed, but I better get a party for single guys. I smiled. With fun entertainment, lots of it. I laughed, but it hurt. When I got home, it was dark. The smell of strong cleaner filled the air. I turned on the lights. My broken fish tank was on its stand, completely empty. I called out for Rebecca, holding on to hope, but only silence answered me. The carpet was clean now, and there was no sign of my friends from the pool. Rebecca must have tidied up. I crouched down and touched the carpet. It felt dry. There was a note on the kitchen counter. Carl noticed it first and picked it up. His face looked troubled when he gave it to me. Damon, I bring too much hurt. I won't let you forgive me. I am out of reach. Rebecca. The hurt in my chest was nothing like the pain in my heart. I couldn't keep my eyes on Carl and turned away. My dear friend was lost and in pain, and I wasn't there to help her. This wasn't her fault. If I had to push through the whole crowd to get to her, I would do it. Forget the group, Carl said. We'll find her. I intend to. I hadn't slept well. There's no way to find a comfy spot when you have a broken rib. The best I could do was lie flat on the floor, wrapped in a few blankets. I paid for it in the morning. When I stood up, my stiff body made me wince. I let out a few groans as I tried to shake off the pain. If it came to a fight, I knew I wouldn't stand a chance. But honestly, Rebecca was worth it. I took a shower, letting the warm water wash over me. If I stood still and let the water flow, I could forget about the pain and think clearly. I needed to get to Tammy's apartment without her noticing. I walked by the guard and the front door. The front door looked simple to get through. I just had to wait and follow someone else in. But the guard was trickier. If he called Tammy, I wouldn't get in at all. Then I had a good idea. I finished up and took a few slow minutes to dry off. I called my boss. He was understanding and let me take more time off. He didn't really have any other option. The hospital gave me the support I needed. I ended the call and called back. This time I reached Trudy, the one person who really supported Rebecca and me. I told her everything. There was no reason to ask for her help if she didn't know what was going on. You're being reckless, Trudy said with a serious tone. I'll help you, but please be careful. Is it Tammy Simpson at the Gardenway Apartments on Grand Street? Yes, that's right, and thank you. I really owe you one. Just take me out for lunch, Trudy replied, and tell me everything. I am excited to share your experiences now, I said with a laugh. Let's go for lunch. You choose the place. After we made this plan, we said our goodbyes. I took the next 30 minutes to get ready. Each item of clothing felt important to me. I really didn't want to put on socks, to be honest. I even thought about just wearing my shoes without them, but I knew I had to keep moving forward. I wasn't going to let what happened bring me down. I opened my sock drawer, but it was empty. The drawer underneath it had nothing in it either. The third drawer was full of my socks, all matched up and stacked in rows by color. Rebecca had rearranged my sock drawer. I found it strange. She didn't want to go. She was taking charge. I clenched my teeth, took a pair of socks, sat on the bed and put them on, trying to act like I wasn't hurt. I groaned a bit from the pain, but I was determined to make my body listen to me. I did the same with my shoes, pushing through the discomfort. It felt strangely freeing. I glanced at the empty drawers. They should be packed with Rebecca's clothes. There should be soft blue things in there. That was my goal. I stood tall and ready. It was time to take action. Mr. Richardson is here to see Tammy Simpson, I told the guard as I gave him my driver's license. I wore sunglasses to cover my bruises. I didn't worry about them keeping track of my visit. I just needed a few moments with Tammy. Ms. Simpson called earlier, the guard said as he handed me my ID. You can go right in. I smiled. Trudy did a great job pretending to be someone else. I think I would have been a good thief. I thanked the guard and parked my car next to the door, then I waited. It took a few minutes until I could go inside the building with a tenant. An older woman came along, struggling with her groceries. Someone must have been watching over me. She was thankful for my help as I carried some of her bags. We shared a quick chat in the elevator. She asked me to stay for lunch, but I kindly said no while placing her bags in her kitchen. I think she never figured out that I wasn't supposed to be there. I was getting good at pretending. She didn't even see how hard it was for me to carry her bags. I knocked on Tammy's door, which was 2 floors down from the grocery lady's place. I could hear some movement behind the door as the locks clicked open. I stood to the side so that the small hole in the door could only see part of my head. I doubt she even noticed me. Tammy's friendly smile disappeared when she saw me. "You can't be here," she said, looking scared, and tried to shut the door. I quickly stuck my foot in the way and winced as the door pressed into my shoe. This was going to hurt. She stopped pushing. "You need to go." "Where is she?" I asked calmly. I didn't want to make the neighbors upset. Tammy attempted to shut the door once more. This time I felt my anger grow. I pushed the door open, which made her step back. I walked in and shut the door behind me. Tammy quickly wrapped her robe tighter around her. "Where is she?" I asked again, raising my voice a bit. I wasn't leaving without answers. Just then, Tony Gordini came into the room from the hallway. He was wearing a t-shirt, boxers, and black socks. Tammy gasped. I recognized him from pictures I had seen online. His gray hair was neatly styled, done at an expensive salon. He looked serious, and one of his hands was behind his back. He walked toward me without showing any signs of fear. I wanted to run, but I stood my ground. He was taller than me by about 5 inches and weighed at least 50 pounds more. "Who are you?" Tony asked, stepping closer but staying out of reach. He sounded like he wasn't used to being overlooked. I hadn't prepared for this moment. Tammy stepped back, covering her mouth with her hand. Her eyes showed fear. I was in big trouble, so I decided to face it head on. "The guy you had hurt last week," I said, taking off my glasses to show my black eyes. A smile appeared on Tony's face as he lifted his hidden hand, pointing a gun at me. "You just don't get it, do you?" Tony said calmly. I knew he wouldn't hesitate to pull the trigger. I could also see that he would take pleasure in it. I caught a glimpse of Tammy from the corner of my eye. She silently said, "I'm sorry." I turned to her, forgetting about the gun. I had seen lips move like that before, just like that. I focused on her eyes, lips, and chin. She seemed to hide it well, but I could see the strong resemblance. Her strange worry for Rebecca made it clear. Before I could think, my mouth spoke. "You're her mother," I said, my jaw dropping in surprise. Tammy's eyes grew big, and I noticed the truth shining in them. She glanced at Tony. Tony glanced back and forth between us. Tammy's lips moved, but no words came out. She was more scared of Tony than I was. "Tammy?" Tony said quickly. He wanted to understand what was happening. I noticed tears building up in Tammy's eyes. She tried to speak, but only made sounds that didn't make sense. The gun moved from pointing at me to pointing at Tammy. Tony did not like being in the dark. I could tell he had a big need to be in control. Tammy was crying, covering her face with her hands as if trying to block out the world. This was not what I had imagined at all. I felt my anger rise because of how foolish everything was. I moved my gaze between Tony and Tammy. "Do you hurt everyone who makes you mad?" I asked, my voice filled with more anger than I intended. "And why did you have your friends beat me up?" I added, feeling bolder. Tony smiled and aimed the gun right at my face. "I'll shoot you for just looking at me," Tony said. The gun stayed perfectly still. He seemed ready to pull the trigger without a second thought. "The last time was just a warning. I don't like other guys getting close to my girlfriend." I tilted my head and chuckled. Tony frowned. He wasn't used to people laughing at him. "I care about her daughter," I told Tony, feeling frustrated. "Why would you think I wanted Tammy?" Tony didn't answer my question. Instead, he oddly aimed the gun over my shoulder at Tammy. "What daughter?" Tony shouted. I moved slightly to keep the gun pointed at me. Tammy was crying hard. Tony seemed to take the idea of a daughter as an insult. I was really messing this up. Then Tony aimed the gun at my stomach. "I'll shoot you both if you don't move," he shouted. I stayed where I was. I knew he would shoot us anyway. "Put the gun down," I demanded. I slowly reached for the gun, thinking he wouldn't really pull the trigger, but his left hand was faster than I thought. It grabbed my throat and pushed me hard against the wall. A sharp pain hit my chest as my ribs shifted. The gun pointed right at my head. "Forget you," he yelled. I realized I had gone too far. I noticed his finger getting ready to pull the trigger. "Your daughter!" Tammy yelled. I felt Tony's grip on my neck getting lighter. His face showed he was confused. I took a breath again. We both looked at Tammy, her makeup smudged down her face. "Your daughter," she said quietly again. Tony dropped his grip on me and the gun fell to his side. "Why did you give him 3,000?" Tony asked, aiming the gun at me like it was a finger. "He helped your daughter get out of jail," Tammy replied, her voice getting louder now that the truth was out. "I was just paying him back." Tony stared at me for a moment, then stepped back and placed the gun on the counter. When?" Tony asked Tammy, confusion on his face. "When you were in jail for 2 years," Tammy sighed. "It was an accident. I wanted to keep her safe and away from trouble, but I just couldn't help myself." "Why didn't you tell me this?" Tony's voice rose with anger. His mood was changing quickly. I moved closer, ready to jump in if he got violent again. I was used to taking hits. Tammy just pointed at the gun in his hand. "I didn't want her to be involved in all this mess," Tammy said, her voice tense. "And your wife would not be happy if she found out. She can hardly stand me as it is." "Wait, his wife knows about them?" I held back a smile that wasn't right. Tony seemed upset. I could almost see him thinking. He turned away from us, walked to the couch, and sat down. I glanced at the gun he had left on the counter. Tammy noticed where I was looking and shook her head. She cleaned her eyes, which made her makeup smudge even more. Then she took my hand and guided me to the sitting area. We sat down with the Godfather and watched him think. Tony looked up at me. He seemed calm. "I made a quick decision," he said, then turned to Tammy. I figured that was his way of saying sorry. I wasn't going to ask for more. "Tell me about her." He spoke with care. Tammy smiled. She looked a bit silly with her makeup smudged, but I could see Rebecca in her smile. "You've met her." "Rebecca. She stayed with me a few weeks back." "Does she know?" Tony asked. "No," Tammy replied fast, "and she can never find out. She has her own issues, and I don't want to add ours to hers." "She's a nice-looking girl," Tony said, almost to himself. Tammy spent much of the morning sharing stories about Rebecca with Tony. During their talk, Tony stepped out to use the bathroom. When he came back, he brought a washcloth and gently cleaned the makeup off Tammy's face. It was surprising to see how he could switch from being so harsh to being kind and caring. Tammy looked very pleased with his attention. I learned that Cathy was a childhood friend of Tammy's. Together, they created a history for Rebecca, made false papers, and after some time, nobody seemed to notice. Tammy had been helping Cathy while she took care of Rebecca. It's no surprise Cathy wanted Rebecca to come back home. Rebecca was very important to her. I tried to mention that I needed to find Rebecca, but I was stopped by a serious look from Tony. There was a way to have this talk, and Tony was in charge. I leaned back, trying to stay relaxed without moving too much. By 10 o'clock, I held a glass of scotch. Tony thought having a drink was a good idea, and he never drank alone. It was tough to move, but the warmth around me helped ease the ache in my body, especially the sharp pain in my side. "What do you do?" Tony asked. He raised his glass and pointed at me. This wasn't just casual chatting. He really wanted to know. "I manage databases for an insurance company," I said, trying to avoid naming the company. I didn't want to see him or anyone he knew again. "Does it pay well?" He was asking me questions like it was an interview. He had just found out he was a father a few hours ago. "I won't go hungry," I replied in a vague way. I took another sip of the whiskey, feeling it warm as it went down. Tony's face was hard to understand. I couldn't tell if he was getting angry with me. I wasn't sure if I could get to the door before him if it came to that. "Why did you come here today?" Tony asked. "Most people listen to what I say. Rebecca left me and won't pick up my calls. She thinks it's her fault for your quick decisions." I was going to say something different, but changed my mind. "I thought Tammy might know where Rebecca is. I want to bring her back." Tony nodded and turned to Tammy. "Do you know where she is?" Tony asked. "Cathy told me. Rebecca won't talk to me anymore." I noticed her eyes starting to fill with tears again. She knew I played a part in what happened. Tammy looked toward me. She cares about you but feels bad about what happened. Tony hurried over to Tammy and put his arm around her. Tammy leaned against him and started to cry. "We'll make this right," Tony said gently. I struggled to understand how someone who was dangerous one moment could be so kind and gentle the next. I just wanted to escape this strange situation. All I wanted was to be with Rebecca again. "Where is she?" I asked, feeling anxious. "Corey's Steakhouse," Tammy sobbed. "It's on Wilkerson Road." "She's working during the day," I said. I recognized the place. It was a big restaurant that served meals for families. I stood up, wanting to leave. Tony got up with me. I knew it wouldn't be an easy goodbye. He motioned for me to come over to the counter, where he wrote down a phone number on a small piece of paper. "If anything goes wrong, if there's something you can't deal with," Tony said as he handed me the paper, "just call this number and tell them who you are." He laid his hand on my shoulder like we were close friends. I didn't like being there, but I didn't want to move his hand away. "Look for a way to make peace between Tammy and Rebecca. I won't get involved, but remember, she is family. I won't hold back if she is treated unfairly." That seems to be how family ties work in the mob. A warning, a request, and a special number that can fix things. I slipped the number into my pocket. "Great," Tony said, smiling at my clear approval. He stretched out his hand like he had won something important. I shook his hand firmly, trying not to show how unsure I really was. He walked to the door and opened it for me. I felt like he didn't do that very often. It seemed like another way of saying sorry. "Look after her," Tammy asked as I started to leave. "I will," I replied. A huge weight lifted off my shoulders when the door shut behind me. This was not the visit I had planned at all. Corey's Steakhouse was really big. It had a sloped green roof that looked almost welcoming. The entrance had fake pillars and a large porch with benches, ready for the evening crowd. It felt more like a fast food place than a nice restaurant. The food was okay, and they served it quickly so you could eat and leave. They rushed customers in and out. This was not the cozy setting I imagined when I thought about Rebecca's cooking. When I walked in, 3 friendly teens greeted me. The restaurant was crowded, and tables stretched far back into the building. The bar had a central counter, and wooden walls meant I could only see a few tables at once. "How many in your group, sir?" a young man with some skin challenges asked. "I'm actually trying to find a waitress named Rebecca Morrison," I said politely. "You can't visit during work hours," he replied quickly. I smiled because I wasn't too worried about the rules. "Are you going to make me search all over for her?" I asked cheerfully. A mother with her family waiting for a table nearby shot me a nasty glance. I smiled back at her. "I can call a manager if you want," the boy said, clearly used to dealing with customers who wanted to break the rules. Suddenly, a loud crash of dishes came from the left side of the restaurant where I couldn't see. It continued for a few seconds before it quieted down. I heard some applause, followed by a loud shout, "You jerk!" Without thinking, I moved quickly. I knew only one person could be at the center of this mess. "These are new pants!" shouted an older man, his face bright red with anger. A dark red sauce was dripping down his khaki pants. His wife was doing her best to pull him back to their table. Everyone at the nearby tables was watching the situation unfold. That's when I noticed her. Rebecca was on her knees, facing away from me. She was doing her best to gather the plates and cups she had dropped. I noticed her shoulders were shaking, and I realized she was close to crying. "I'm really sorry," she said with a shaky voice, trying to clean his pants with a cloth. "Don't touch me, you useless," the man began, but then he stopped when he saw me approaching quickly. I had taken off my glasses, and my angry eyes were fixed on him. All the frustration from the past week felt like it was about to explode. "Sit!" I shouted. The man obeyed. He will never understand how smart that move was. I took out my business card. "Send me the bill," I said as I gave it to his wife. The man opened his mouth to speak, but I said clearly, "It was an accident. Let's leave it at that." He stopped talking. Rebecca was shaking, and I could hear her trying not to cry. She heard me, but she didn't turn around. I knelt down beside her and began to help her fill the tray. Our hands touched over a cup, and then she let go. The tears started to fall. I held her close, trying to forget about my aching rib and everything else in the restaurant. "Please don't go away again," I said softly in her ear. "I feel empty without you." She cried and nodded, hugging me tightly until everything around us blurred. "I love you," I said again. More tears fell. I supported her as she got up, trying my best to look strong even though I wasn't. A manager walked over, surprised by the mess near us. He looked at Rebecca's red eyes and softly spoke into the microphone on his headset. "Rebecca," he said gently, meeting my gaze, "please take this man to the back. I have a team coming to take care of this." He then walked over to the upset man with the dark stain on his clothes, trying to keep him happy. I liked the manager. He was good at his job. Rebecca guided me through the kitchen to a break room for employees. She had been wiping her eyes as we walked. When we got there, she faced me and our lips touched. The gentle kiss soon turned into something stronger, her hands wrapped around my head, bringing me closer. In that moment, she was mine again. That kiss made all the hurt in my chest feel worth it. "See what I've done to you?" Rebecca said as she pulled back. I could see sadness in her eyes. I didn't like that sadness. She gently touched my cheek, trying to make the hurt go away. "I have a secret," I said softly. "I want to share it with you, but you need to be careful. I know you might want to rush, but please don't." I rubbed my thumbs on Rebecca's cheeks, cleaning away her tears. She looked at me, worried and confused. "I'm scared I might lose you if you find out in another way." "Please tell me," Rebecca urged. Her eyes showed care, so I decided to share my secret. I shared everything I learned that morning with her. I didn't worry about how Tammy or Tony would feel about Rebecca finding out. Keeping secrets would only cause us more pain. When I finished talking, I looked nervously into her eyes. "You will never lose me again," Rebecca said gently, brushing aside her worries about her parents. Our kiss felt more deep, more like us. I wish that time could freeze. In that moment, everything was right again. Then the manager walked in, and we pulled away from each other. He looked at both of us with a small smile. "Your shift is taken care of," the man said to Rebecca. "Take the day to think if this job is a good fit for you." "It isn't," I replied for Rebecca. She looked at me and nodded in agreement. She was a chef, not a server. The manager smiled, relieved he didn't have to decide about letting someone go. "I hope this doesn't mean you won't join us for a meal every now and then," the manager said, trying to win us over. This guy had too much free time, a problem solver who always keeps their eyes on the prize. "Of course not, Frank," I replied, glancing at his name tag. I extended my hand and he shook it firmly. "It all makes sense now," Rebecca said as we left the restaurant. "I see things more clearly." I nodded in agreement. "But I'm still not going to talk to her," she added. "Not after everything she did." Rebecca gently touched my bruised cheek. "I can't believe he thought you were a gigolo." "Am I not attractive enough?" I joked. "You could actually make good money," Rebecca said wisely, a playful smile on her face. She turned to glance out the window. "But I feel a bit scared," she confessed quietly. "Scared of us?" "Of what's coming," Rebecca replied. "Look at what's happened to you. It's only been less than 2 weeks." I glanced at her, then back at the road. No tears, no sadness, just deep thinking. "You think what happened before decides what will happen next," I said. "I believe the worst is behind us. From now on, it will be easier." I glanced over and saw that Rebecca didn't share my hope. "I don't regret any of it," I continued, chuckling. "I could have done without the troubles, but it was a small price for having you in my life." "What if things get worse?" she asked. "What if they get better?" I replied. That made Rebecca smile. "How are you feeling?" she asked. I looked over to her playful smile. There was a twinkle in her eyes that made me feel excited. "I'm not that sore," I said with a big grin. "That's good," Rebecca replied, her hand resting on my leg. I looked back at the road as her hand moved higher. "I've heard that making up can be really nice." I suddenly felt like the speed limit didn't matter anymore. I stood at the altar, or what looked like one, in a little chapel in Las Vegas. The last few months had been the happiest of my life. I hadn't been hurt for a long time, so I thought it was the right time to ask. I barely started my question when Rebecca said yes. I think she was worried something might interrupt us before I finished. Rebecca was studying to be a chef. She was so happy that it made me feel even better, almost like I was floating. In time, Rebecca and Tammy got along again, but she never called Tammy her mother. It was Rebecca's secret now, and it would stay with me if she wanted it to. Carl looked a bit rough beside me. He was going through post-party blues. As he promised, he threw me a bachelor party that had 3 clubs and ended around 4 in the morning. It was the first time in my life that seeing women without clothes didn't excite me much. Carl made up for that. I had a blast watching him fall for different girls again and again. "You ready?" Cathy shouted from the door. Cathy was always Rebecca's sister, and that's how Rebecca liked it. Cathy was the only family she knew, and if the truth came out, it would change everything. Cathy took good care of her while they were growing up. To Rebecca, Cathy felt more like a sister than other sisters might. When I asked Rebecca to marry me, Cathy relaxed her protective nature and welcomed me as a brother. Now we would have someone to share the holidays with. I smiled at Cathy and stood tall. Cathy waved to the elderly woman at the piano, and the lovely tune of "Here Comes the Bride" began to play. I thought I would see Rebecca appear any moment in the white dress that she and Cathy had chosen together. It wasn't a big wedding gown, but I knew it would look lovely on her. Carl and I were dressed a bit casually, too, wearing black suits, white shirts, and blue ties instead of fancy tuxedos. It didn't seem right to go all out when we were almost running away together. Cathy's eyes got big, and she raised her hands in front of her as Rebecca came closer. I heard something fragile fall and break, followed by the sound of other things hitting the ground. "Oh, dear," Cathy said sadly as she quickly moved out of my sight. I started walking toward the doorway, hoping it wasn't what I thought it was. Then, Rebecca turned the corner, with Cathy helping her along. Half of Rebecca's hair was loose, while the other half was still in the bun she had spent a long time fixing. The flowers in her hands were mostly damaged, and her white dress had a dark stain on the front. The piano player stopped playing, and the person officiating the ceremony cleared his throat awkwardly. Rebecca looked like she might cry. I felt lost, not knowing what to do. "Damon!" Carl called out. I turned to him. Carl had picked up a pot of flowers from the altar, and he held it out to me. His goofy smile told me everything I needed to know. I opened my suit jacket and took the pink flowers out of the pot. I accidentally spilled the green water all over my white shirt. I gave the pot back to Carl and walked over to Rebecca with the flowers. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "I had an accident." I took the mess of flowers from Rebecca and gave her the pink ones, even though their stems were way too long. A tear appeared in her eye, even though she smiled. "I love you, you know," Rebecca said. I threw the damaged flowers onto the floor and bent my arm. She linked her arm with mine, and I signaled to the lady at the piano. The music began once more, and I led my bride to the justice of the peace, who was finally ready for us. Epilogue. Rebecca was trembling when the 5th meter showed the same results as the others. She felt a rush of worry when she saw them lined up on the counter. Everyone seemed to agree with the plan. A 6th one felt crazy, but she thought she should head to the store again anyway. Rebecca heard the garage door opening and held her breath. Damon was home early. She hurriedly put the items into the kitchen drawer. Then she opened the fridge and took out the balsamic chicken she had made for dinner. If she looked busy, maybe he wouldn't notice anything was off. She had no idea how he might respond. She was worried about losing him because of this. "I finished work early," Damon said cheerfully, hanging up his jacket in the closet. "That's nice," Rebecca said, her words coming out quickly. She noticed and quickly added, "I'm happy you're back." Damon could tell that Rebecca was feeling a bit rushed. He decided to drop the issue. "What's for dinner?" he asked. "Chicken," Rebecca said as she placed the chicken pieces on a tray. "Is something wrong?" Damon wondered, noticing her short answer. "What do you mean?" Rebecca replied while adjusting the oven temperature. "You never just make chicken, my dear," Damon said. "It always has a special name that I don't understand." He stepped closer and hugged Rebecca from behind. She leaned back and gave him a light kiss on the cheek, then went back to placing the tray of chicken in the oven. Damon pulled back, surprised, and thought about why she hadn't kissed him like she usually did when he came home. "Did I do something wrong?" Damon asked, stepping away a bit. Rebecca accidentally caught the edge of the pan on the oven, lost her grip, and everything fell to the floor. Frustrated, she clenched her hand. She turned to Damon, tears streaming down her face. "There's been another accident," Rebecca cried. leaning into Damon's arms. He understood she wasn't talking about the chicken. "Just tell me," Damon whispered, holding her tightly as she gathered her strength. "Promise you won't be mad?" Rebecca asked, her voice shaky. Damon promised, so she slowly opened the drawer. It took a moment for Damon to understand what he was seeing. He picked up one of the digital meters. The test showed the word pregnant. He took out another one, and it said the same thing. He smiled, knowing the rest would say the same too. "You will be a great mother," Damon said, holding Rebecca close. "Are you upset?" Rebecca asked. Damon replied with a kiss. It was a long kiss that said, "Welcome home, welcome to being parents." Rebecca felt warm and happy in his arms. It was just an accident, after all. Hey, audience! If you liked this video and want to keep up with more thrilling stories, make sure to subscribe to Prince Cheating Tales and hit the notification bell. You don't want to miss out on our upcoming adventures. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next wonderful story.